Kang Jun-hyuk buttoned his coat in the dark while his pregnant wife pretended to sleep. Amara had learned that skill inside this marriage, the art of lying still, while everything inside her was breaking. She heard the soft click of the wardrobe, the careful way he moved across the bedroom floor, trying not to wake her. The sound of a man who had gotten very good at leaving. 8 months pregnant, Christmas Eve, and her husband was walking out the door to be with someone else. She didn't cry. She had used up her tears 3 weeks ago when she found the first message on the shared tablet, just a name, just a time, just enough to confirm what her body had already been telling her for months. Tonight there would be no more pretending. She sat up. Jun-hyuk. He stopped. He did not turn around. If you've ever loved someone and wondered whether you ever really knew them at all, stay with me. Because this story is going to go somewhere you will not see coming. Subscribe to this channel right now so you never miss what happens next. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me the city and country where you're watching. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to that bedroom in Seoul on the coldest Christmas Eve of Amara Whitmore's life. She had married him on a Tuesday in April, 6 years earlier, in a small ceremony that his people tolerated, and her mother never fully accepted. Amara remembered her mother standing at the back of the room in a lavender dress, smiling the way mothers smile when they've already decided to keep their opinions to themselves, until the marriage either proved them wrong or proved them right. Her mother was a patient woman. Amara had met Kang Jun-hyuk at a corporate restructuring conference in Hong Kong. She was 32, working as a senior financial strategist for a multinational advisory firm. He was presenting as a legitimate business executive because he was one, at least partly. The Betrayal group had legal subsidiaries all over East Asia. Real estate, logistics, hospitality. The kind of money that had been cleaned so many times it had forgotten where it came from. She had not known in the beginning exactly who he was. By the time she understood the full shape of his world, she was already in love with the man, and the man was the world, and there was no clean way to separate them. She had tried once, in the second year of their marriage, had packed a bag, sat on the edge of the hotel bed in Busan with her hands in her lap and her heart beating like it was trying to leave without her. He had found her within 4 hours, not through surveillance, not through fear. He had simply known the way two people who have been inside each other's silences long enough always know exactly where she would go when she needed to think. He sat beside her on that hotel bed without a word for a long time, and then he said very quietly, "I'm not asking you to stay. I'm asking you to tell me what I did wrong." She had stayed. That was 6 years ago. Now she was watching his back in the dark, 8 months pregnant with their son, and she knew the answer to every question she'd been too afraid to ask. "Where are you going?" she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice had that particular flatness that comes after a person has moved through shock and grief and arrived somewhere much colder. Jun-hyuk turned around. He was a tall man, lean in a way that suggested discipline rather than ease, with a face that most people found impossible to read. That was something the outside world never understood about him. They thought he was cold. He wasn't cold. He was controlled. There was a difference. And for years, Amara had believed she was the only person who could see it. "There's an issue at one of the Incheon properties," he said. "I need to be there. On Christmas Eve. Problems don't wait for holidays." She looked at him. The bedside lamp was off. The only light came from the city through the window, all of Seoul doing what Seoul always did at night, glittering and humming and pretending that the dark didn't exist. She could see his face well enough. She had memorized that face years ago. Every shift of expression, every version of the lie before he learned to tell it smoothly. "Sit down," she said. "Amara, sit down." Something in her voice made him pause. He set his keys on the dresser. He didn't sit, but he stopped moving toward the door. "I've been waiting," she said, "for you to come to me. I told myself, give him time. He's under pressure. The organization has problems. He carries things he can't talk about. I made every excuse I could think of for 4 months. She shifted in the bed, because at 8 months there was no comfortable position. Everything was weight and pressure and waiting. "I found the message, Jun-hyuk." He was very still. "Which message?" he said carefully. That was when she knew for certain. Because an innocent man says, "What message?" with confusion in his voice. A guilty one says which, and tries to figure out what you know before he decides what to admit. "The tablet," she said. The fireplace is ready. Come safely. I wish you could stay until morning. She let the words sit in the room between them. Seo Yuna. The name you never mentioned. The number that's been calling you at 2 in the morning. He didn't deny it. What he did instead was worse. He sat down at the foot of the bed slowly and ran his hands over his face. And when he looked at her, his expression had that particular quality she recognized, not guilt exactly, but management. He was managing this, deciding how much to give her. It's not what you're assuming, he said. Tell me what it is. She's connected to a business situation. It's complicated. The message was intimate, was out of context. Junyuk. Her voice broke on his name, just the once. She pulled it back immediately, but it had already happened, that fracture in the flatness, and she hated that he had heard it. Do that. Don't explain it to me like I'm someone who doesn't understand language. He looked at her. Something moved across his face, real pain, she thought, actual pain. And, for one terrible moment, she thought he was going to tell her the truth. Not a managed version. The real thing. You're 8 months pregnant, he said. You're exhausted. The stress is affecting, she laughed. It was not a happy sound. You're going to tell me I'm imagining it. I'm going to tell you that this is not the night to have this conversation. When is the night? When do I get the night, Junyuk? After the baby? When you've had more time to arrange things. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed with it took. Everything was an effort now. Everything was the baby and the weight and the awareness of a life inside her that had nothing to do with this and deserved better than this room. This conversation. This man in his coat with his keys on the dresser. You've been leaving for months. I've been watching you leave for months and telling myself I was wrong. I am done telling myself I'm wrong, he stood. For a moment they were just two people standing in the dark in an expensive apartment in Seoul. A sound like green wood splitting, and the distance between them was not the length of the room, but something much longer, the distance of every night she had rolled toward him in bed and felt him already somewhere else. Of every morning she had watched him answer a message before. He said good morning. Of the way she had slowly, carefully, without realizing it was happening, learned to need less from him so she wouldn't have to feel the ache of not getting it. I'll be back by morning, he said. She walked to the Christmas tree. It stood in the corner of the living room, decorated exactly the way she had decorated every tree in her life, a little imperfect, a little crooked on top, with the handmade ornaments she kept, even though they didn't match the expensive ones he had someone buy. She had wrapped 2 gifts and placed them underneath. One was for him. One was for the baby, even though the baby wasn't born yet, even though giving a gift to someone who didn't yet have a name felt like a kind of prayer. She picked up her wedding ring. She had not planned to do it. Her hands simply knew. She placed the ring on top of the small gift for the baby. Carefully. The way you place something you are not sure you can pick back up. If you walk out that door tonight, she said, without turning around, don't expect me to be here when you get back. He was quiet for a long moment. She waited. She heard him pick up his keys. She heard the door. It did not slam. That was almost the worst part. It closed quietly, the latch catching soft and final, the way doors close when the person leaving doesn't want a scene. Amara stood in front of the Christmas tree for what felt like a very long time. The city kept glittering outside. Seoul did not care. Seoul had seen 10,000 marriages end in 10,000 apartments just like this one, and it would see 10,000 more before anyone noticed. She did not cry. She sat down on the floor in front of the tree, 8 months pregnant and alone on Christmas Eve, and she breathed. And then she started looking for something to do. It was the box that changed everything. She had been restless in the way pregnant women get restless, when the body won't let them sleep and the mind won't let them rest, moving through rooms, touching things, needing her hands to be doing something. She ended up in the study, which was mostly Junhyuk's space, a room of shelves and documents, and the particular organized quiet of a man who controlled information the way other men controlled territory. She was not looking for anything specific, but she found the box on the bottom shelf, behind a row of law texts. Small, wooden, obviously old, the kind of thing that doesn't belong in a room of clean, modern surfaces. She recognized the craftsmanship. It was the kind of box his father had liked. Kang Dae-won, the man who had built Betrayal from the ground up in the 70s and 80s, had collected handmade things. Amara had met him twice before he died. She remembered him as a man who looked like what Jun-hyuk would look like if Jun-hyuk ever let himself get tired. The box had a brass latch. She almost left it alone. She opened it. Inside, a fountain pen. A brass key, small, old, the kind that opened things like lockboxes or old furniture. Nothing digital about it. And a letter in an envelope, the paper yellowed just slightly with age, addressed in Daewon's handwriting. Amara had seen his handwriting before, in the frames on the office wall, in the archived family documents Jun-hyuk kept in binders he never opened in front of her. The name on the envelope was Han Seo-rin. Amara did not know the name. She held the envelope for a long time without opening it. It wasn't hers to open. She knew that. She also knew green. She also knew that she was alone on Christmas Eve in an apartment that had to feel like a beautiful cage, 8 months pregnant, her wedding ring under a Christmas tree, and her husband somewhere she wasn't supposed to know about. She opened the letter. Daewon's handwriting was careful and slow, the handwriting of a man who chose his words the way you choose stones to build with. He wrote that he had made a mistake he could not undo. He had failed a woman he loved in the years when she most needed him to show up. He had been afraid of what it would cost him, of what people would say, of the life he had already built around a different version of himself. He had let her wait and keep waiting until waiting became just the shape of her life. He wrote that he refused to let Jun-hyuk erase her from the family after he was gone. He wrote that he was sorry he hadn't been braver when it mattered. He wrote her name Seo-so-rin with the particular tenderness of a father who knew he had no right to it anymore and used it anyway. Amara set the letter down. Failed her as a father. She read the line again. Then she sat on the floor of the study because at 8 months there was always sitting. Always the weight of everything pressing down, and she started thinking. She did not sleep that night. She went through every archived document she could access in the study, which was not everything, because Jun-hyuk was a careful man, but it was enough. She had spent 12 years in financial analysis. She knew how to read structure. She knew how to find what was being hidden by looking at the shape of what surrounded the gap. By 3 a.m, she had found 2 things. First, Han Seo-rin appeared in a very old family photograph she found slipped inside the back of a leather portfolio. A young woman standing beside a younger Kang Daewon, her arm through his, both of them squinting slightly into a summer sun somewhere outside Seoul. The resemblance was subtle, but once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. The jaw, the set of the eyes, the particular way they both held their shoulders. Second, there was a payment, large, processed through Betrayal Holdings, not through personal accounts, through the corporate infrastructure disguised as a legal protection expense. Dated 4 years ago, a year after Daewon's death. A sound like the amount made her sit forensics. She had run enough corporate for her career to know what she was looking at. A Sawton. When a company processes a personal payment through its corporate structure, it means the person making the payment didn't want it attached to their private finances. It means they wanted the money to be invisible in a way that personal wire transfers never were. Someone had paid Han Seo-rin through Betrayal Holdings, while Jun-hyuk was running Betrayal Holdings. She went back to the box. She looked at the brass key. She turned it over in her palm, feeling its weight. It was a real key for a real lock somewhere. The kind of key that didn't open a door. She thought about the letter. He refuses to let Jun-hyuk erase her. Then she thought about a woman named Han Seo-rin, who had been paid a large sum of money from corporate funds, and who she had never, in 6 years of marriage, once heard Jun-hyuk mention. She got up from the floor carefully, the way she always did now, rolling onto her side first, then pushing up, one hand on the shelf. She went to the bedroom and packed a bag. Not everything. Just enough. The document she'd photographed. Daewon's letter. The brass key. Her laptop. Her passport. She wrote nothing on a piece of paper and left it on the kitchen counter. There was nothing to write. She took her wedding ring from beneath the Christmas tree and put it in her coat pocket. Not on her finger. In her pocket. She called a car service from the lobby. Outside, Seoul was doing what Seoul always did at night, relentless and bright and utterly indifferent to the grief of any single woman standing on any particular sidewalk at 4 a.m. Snow had started coming down, thin and almost invisible, the kind that looks like static when it catches the light. Amara got in the car. She was no longer thinking about Seo Yuna. She was no longer thinking about a fireplace and a message that had cracked her marriage open. She was thinking about a woman whose name appeared in an old letter in a small town somewhere outside Busan, who had been paid to stay gone and had not been paid enough. She was thinking about a brass key and what it opened. She was thinking about a father who wanted his daughter to be remembered, and a son who had decided otherwise. By the time the cities blurred past the car windows and the highway opened up, Amara Whitmore was not running from her husband's affair. She was hunting something much larger, and she had not yet begun to understand how deep it went. The highway south of Seoul was nearly empty at 4:30 in the morning on Christmas Day. Amara sat in the back of the car with day one's letter folded in her coat pocket and the brass key in her closed fist, and she watched the city dissolve behind her into flat, dark farmland and highway lights that came and went like slow heartbeats. The driver had asked once where she was going, and she had said Busan, and he had nodded and turned the radio down without being asked. She appreciated that. She was not in a condition for small talk or for the particular type of forced cheerfulness that strangers attempted when they sensed a woman alone was carrying something heavy. She was not thinking about Jun Hyuk. That surprised her. 6 years of marriage, and she expected his face to follow her everywhere tonight. Expected to spend the drive replaying every argument and every silence and every small erosion of trust that had brought her to the back of a hired car with a packed bag at 4 in the morning. But he wasn't there. Her mind had moved past him, the way a river moves past a stone, not ignoring it, just no longer stopped by it. She was thinking about the photograph. The woman in the photograph beside Da-won had been young, maybe 20, maybe a little older, with serious eyes and the particular posture of someone who had learned to take up less space than they were owed. Amara knew that posture. She had worn it herself in the early years of her career, in boardrooms, where she was the only black woman, and sometimes the only woman, and the men around the table looked at her the way people look at something they haven't decided to believe in yet. You learn to hold yourself smaller. You tell yourself it's strategy. Eventually you stop being sure whether it's strategy or whether the smallness has become real. Han Seo-rin had been standing in a summer photograph with her father's arm linked through hers, and she had been holding herself like a woman who knew she was allowed to exist there, but wasn't entirely sure she was allowed to stay. Amara wanted to meet her. She also understood, with the particular clarity that comes from exhaustion and grief, and the long flat dark of a highway at 4 in the morning, that she might be making a serious mistake. She was 8 months pregnant. She had left her home without telling anyone where she was going. She had taken documents from her husband's study. She was driving toward a woman she had found in a letter and a photograph, in a town she'd never visited, following a brass key she didn't yet know the purpose of. Her mother would have had a great deal to say about all of this. She took out her phone and almost called her. Then she put it away. Her mother was in Atlanta. It was 2 in the afternoon in Atlanta on Christmas Day, and her mother would be at her house. And Amara could not explain any of this on a phone call without crying, and she was not ready to cry yet. The crying would come later. Right now she needed to stay sharp. She looked up Han Seo-rin on her phone. Not much came up. A bookstore. A small business registration in a coastal town about 40 minutes outside Busan proper, a place called Gijonggun, which Amara had driven through once but never stopped in. The bookstore had a name, Heian, which she looked up and found meant something like horizon, or the line where the sea meets the sky. There was a modest website, mostly just the address and hours, and a few photographs of the interior old wood shelves, afternoon light coming through the windows, stacks of books with handwritten recommendation cards tucked into them. The kind of place that existed because someone loved books more than they loved money. No social media, no other public presence. Just a woman and a bookstore and a name that didn't appear anywhere in the Betrayal public records, which meant either she was completely separate from that world or she had been removed from it so thoroughly that the removal itself was invisible. Amara thought about the money, the corporate payment, the size of it. She put her phone down and looked the window and looked out blue and let her mind run the numbers again, the way it always did when she was onto something, the way she had always been able to feel a financial structure, the way some people could feel weather coming, a low pressure in the chest, a specific quality to the quiet. Jun Hyuk had not paid Han Seo-rin from his personal accounts. He had run it through Betrayal Holdings. There were two reasons a man in his position would do that. One, he wanted the payment to appear as a business expense rather than a personal disbursement, which was relevant for tax purposes and also for keeping it hidden from anyone reviewing his private finances. Two, by using Betrayal holdings, the payment became a corporate liability rather than a personal, which meant it could be buried in legal expense filings, marked as privileged, and never discussed openly. Both reasons pointed to the same conclusion. He was not paying her off. He was making sure the payment could never be traced back to him as an individual. That was different. That was careful in a specific way. The kind of careful you practice when you know the thing you're hiding is bigger than just money. She fell asleep somewhere south of Chinon, and woke up when the driver said her name, and outside the windows the sky had gone gray with early morning, and the air looked cold and close to the water. The bookstore was not open at 7 in the morning on Christmas Day. Amara stood in front of it anyway. It was on a narrow street 3 blocks from the water, sandwiched between a small hardware shop that was closed and what looked like a traditional tea house that might open later. The bookstore's windows were dark inside, but the sign above the door was clean and recently painted, and the handwriting on it was careful and deliberate, the same quality of care she had seen in the recommendation cards in the website photographs. She knocked anyway. Nothing. She knocked again, louder, and stood back, and after a minute she saw some movement through the glass, a light turning on in the back, a silhouette moving through the store, unhurried but not alarmed. The silhouette reached the door and paused and looked at her through the glass. For a moment, the way anyone would look at a heavily pregnant woman standing outside their door at 7 in the morning on Christmas Day, and then the lock turned. Han Seorin was in her late 50s, which Amara had calculated from the photograph. But she was one of those women where the age surprised you slightly, not because she looked younger, but because she looked more present than most people did at any age, very still, very direct, with dark eyes that looked at things completely, without looking past them. She was wearing a heavy sweater and had clearly just woken up, her hair not yet arranged, a cup of something steaming in her hand she'd brought from wherever she'd been sleeping. She looked at Amara's face, then at the bag over her shoulder, then at the very obvious pregnancy, then back at her face. "You're not from here," she said, in Korean. "No," Amara said, in Korean that was careful but functional. 6 years of living in Seoul did things to a person. "My name is Amara Whitmore. My husband is Kang Jun-hyuk." She watched Seo-rin's face and saw what she expected, not surprise exactly, but a kind of settling, a sound like green wood splitting, like a woman who had been waiting for a knock on the door for years and had reached the point where she'd stopped flinching every time she heard footsteps outside. "I found a letter and a key," his father's. She reached into her coat pocket and held out the brass key without stepping forward, the way you might offer something to an animal you weren't sure of yet. "I think it belongs to you." Seo-rin looked at the key for a long moment without touching it. "You should come inside," she said. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't, then come inside." The back of the bookstore was where Seo-rin actually lived, in a modest set of rooms separated from the shelves by a heavy curtain, a kitchen, a sitting area with 2 low chairs, a sleeping space beyond another door. It was the home of a woman who had pared her life down to what mattered, without making it feel like deprivation. There were books everywhere, but they were organized with the obsessive care of someone who loved order and knew where every single thing was. There were a few photographs on a shelf near the kitchen, old ones, none of which included Jun-hyuk, none of which included anyone Amara recognized. Seo-rin made tea, not because it was a social nicety, because her hands needed something to do. Amara sat in one of the low chairs and put Daewon's letter on the small table between them. Seo-rin came back with the tea, set the cups down, and looked at the letter. Her handwriting was on the emblem, the name, on the front. She didn't touch it. "He sent it to you," Amara said. "It was in a box in our study, with the key. He said he was going to send it." Seo-rin sat down across from her. "He died before he did." She looked at the envelope the way you look at something that has been a source of pain for so long that the pain and the thing have become the same object. "I assume Jun-hyuk found it and destroyed it. He kept it." Something crossed Seo-rin's face that Amara couldn't entirely read. "Why would he keep it?" "I don't know." "Because he's not sentimental," Seo-rin said, and the flatness in her voice on those words was not bitterness exactly, but something adjacent to it, the particular tone of a person who has had enough years to move past bitterness and arrive somewhere more accurate. He doesn't keep things unless they're useful, which means he kept it because he thought he might need it someday. Need it for what? To prove that he knew about it, that he had it, that it existed and had never been used and therefore could never be used against him. She picked up her tea. My brother is a very careful man, Amara. The word brother sat in the room between them. Amara looked at her. Seo-rin held her gaze without flinching. He told you, Amara said. He never told me anything. I already knew. She set her tea down. I am Kong Daewon's first daughter, Jun-yuk's half-sister, the one the family was not allowed to talk about. She said it with the quietness of a person who has had to introduce themselves this way many times and has stopped waiting for the people they tell to know how to respond. My mother was a woman Daewon loved before he married Jun-hyuk's mother. He did not stop loving her immediately. It took him longer than it should have. She looked at the photographs on her shelf. I was the evidence of that inconvenience. Amara was quiet. He acknowledged me privately, Seo-rin continued. He helped with money when I was young. We met sometimes. Not often. He was always afraid his wife would find out. Then his wife died, and I thought maybe now we can be more honest about what this is. I was almost 50 years old, and I still thought that. She almost smiled, but it didn't complete itself. He died before it happened, and then Jun-hyuk came with lawyers. How much did he offer you? The number Seo-rin named was exactly the number Amara had found in the Betrayal Holdings records. He didn't pay it from his personal accounts, Amara said. He ran it through the company. Seo-rin was very still. I refused the money, she said. I told him I wasn't asking for money. I was asking to be part of the family, to have my father's name acknowledged. Not his empire, not his organization. Just she stopped. Just the truth of what I am. And he said no. He said that my existence was a complication his family didn't need, and that my father had made a private mistake, and the private mistake would remain private. She picked up her tea again. Her hands were steady. He was very polite about it. Jun-hyuk is always very polite when he's destroying something. Amara thought about the man she had married, about the way he could say devastating things in a pleasant tone of voice, as though the words and the emotion they should carry had been surgically separated. She had found it magnetic once. The control of it. The discipline. She found it differently now. She reached back into her bag and placed the second item on the table, the photographs she had taken of the Betrayal Holdings records on her phone. He used corporate money to pay you, she said, not personal funds. That means the payment was a corporate liability, which means it was processed through Betrayal's legal expense accounts, which means there's a paper trail inside the company's own records that he can't erase without leaving another paper trail. Seo-rin looked at the photographs of the documents. She had the particular quality that smart people have when they are looking at something that confirms something they already suspected displays. Not surprise, just recognition. What does that mean for me? She asked. I don't know yet, but I think it means he was scared of you. Scared enough to be careful about how he paid you off, which means he knew that what you were claiming had legitimacy. You don't hide a payment that carefully, unless you're worried about what happens if someone sees it. Seo-rin stood up and went to the shelf where the photographs were and picked up a small key from behind one of the frames. It was identical to the one Amara had in her pocket. Same brass, same age, same size. She held it up. Amara took out the key from Daewon's box and set it on the table. They looked at each other. My father gave me this 10 years before he died, Seo-rin said. He told me it opened something I would need when the time came. He never told me what. She came back to her chair. I assumed there was a second key. I assumed Jun-hyuk had it. I assumed it was gone. It was in a wooden box on the bottom shelf of his study, which he kept. Seo-rin was quiet for a moment, turning her key over in her fingers. There's a storage facility, she said finally, in Busan. My father rented it 30 years ago under a name that isn't Kang. I found the rental record in some papers he left with my mother before she died. I always assumed the key opened something there. She looked at Amara. I never went. Because I needed both keys and I only had one. Amara picked up her key from the table and held it out. You have both now. The storage facility was 40 minutes away on the industrial edge of Busan where the streets were wide and ugly, and the buildings all had the same utilitarian look of places built to hold things rather than to be looked at. It was a concrete block of a structure, rows of corrugated metal doors, The kind of place that smelled of dust and old paint and the weight of things left alone for a long time. The unit Seo Rin's father had rented was in the back of the third row. They stood in front of it with both keys, and Amara let Seo Rin open the lock, because it was hers to open, had always been hers to open, and Amara was not going to be the one to take that from her. The lock was stiff with age. Seo Rin used both hands. It opened. Inside was a metal vault box, the kind you found in old law offices, a real vault. Combination plus key, and beside it, wrapped in a cloth that had yellowed and gone stiff, a stack of documents held together with a rubber band so old it had fused to the paper, and a single cardboard box, sealed with Seo Rin's name on it, in Daewon's handwriting. Seo Rin stood in the doorway of the storage unit and looked at her name on the box, and did not move for a moment. Amara did not say anything. She had learned enough about grief, in this particular shape, the grief of receiving what you were owed too late, to change anything, to know that it required quiet. Seo Rin reached out and touched her name. Then she picked up the documents. The rubber band disintegrated when she peeled it away. She held the papers carefully, the way you hold things that are fragile, not because of their age, but because of what they mean. The top document was a family inheritance amendment, signed by Kang Daewon. It named Han Seo Rin as his daughter and as a beneficiary of his personal estate, not the Betrayal organization, not his criminal holdings or his corporate structures, his personal estate, the legitimately held property, the private savings, the things that were Daewon the man, rather than Daewon the kingpin. The document was complete. The signature page was there. The witness signatures were there. Amara read the date on the signature page. It was dated 3 weeks before Daewon's death. She went very still. He signed it, Seo Rin said. She was reading the same page. Her voice had lost some of its evenness. Just slightly. He actually signed it. Yes. Junhyuk told me. She stopped. When he came with the lawyers, he told me that my father had intended to file a formal acknowledgement, but had died before completing the documentation. That there was nothing signed, nothing legal. That the most he could offer me was the settlement, which was generous given the legal standing of my claim. Amara looked at her. He knew, Amara said. Seo Rin looked back at her. He knew, she confirmed, and her voice was flat and precise, and entirely without drama, which was somehow worse than if it had broken. They stood in the storage unit, with the signed document between them and the winter cold, coming off the concrete, and the weight of what that sentence meant settling down over both of them like weather. Junhyuk had known his father signed the document. He had known Seo Rin had a legitimate legal claim to recognition and to a share of Daewon's personal estate. He had come to her with lawyers and told her there was nothing signed and offered her a corporate settlement to go away and stay gone. He had lied, not sloppily, not reactively, deliberately and carefully, and with the full weight of his organization's legal apparatus behind him. He had looked at his half-sister and told her their father had failed to follow through, had left her with nothing, and had offered her money to accept that as the truth. Amara thought about the way he had stood in their bedroom the night before and told her that stress and pregnancy were affecting her judgment. The mechanism was identical. The delivery was the same. He had looked at a woman who knew something true and had told her politely and firmly, and with absolute control, that she was wrong. She felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger exactly, she had already moved past the anger stage somewhere on the highway south of Seoul. This was something colder and more durable. The feeling of understanding a person fully, perhaps for the first time. We need to secure these documents, she said. Yes. Not here. Not with me and not with you. Somewhere neither of us could be pressured to access. Seo Rin looked at her steadily. You think he'll come looking? I think when he goes back to the apartment, and I'm not there, he's going to know that I took documents from the study. He's going to know what I found. He's a careful man, and careful men move quickly when something gets away from them. She picked up the vault box carefully. Is there someone you trust? A lawyer, a friend, anyone outside the Betrayal network who could hold these? Seo Rin thought for a moment. There's an old man, she said. Park Min-seok. He was my father's legal advisor before Junhyuk replaced him. He lives in Busan. He's been retired for years. She paused. He came to see me once after my father died. He seemed guilty about something. I didn't know what. I didn't push him. We need to talk to him. He's old, so is this document. Seo Rin looked at her again. The same direct, complete look she'd given her at the door of the bookstore at 7 in the morning, the look that went all the way through you without trying to. You came a long way, she said, for a woman your husband was cheating on. Amara was quiet for a beat. I came for this, she said. The other thing, the woman, the fireplace, all of it, I think that's almost beside the point now. Is it? He's been erasing people, Amara said. People who inconvenience him. People who know too much. People who exist in ways that complicate his version of his life. She put her hand briefly, unconsciously, against the side of her stomach, the habit of late pregnancy, the automatic checking in. I've been watching him do it. I just didn't know I was watching it. Seo Rin was quiet for a moment. How long have you known? Known? Amara thought about it honestly. Since last night. Suspected? Longer than I want to admit. Carried the documents out of the storage unit and entered the cold gray light of a Busan winter morning, and Seo Rin locked the unit behind them, and they stood on the concrete outside for a moment before moving toward the car. Amara's phone buzzed. She looked at it. 17 missed calls from Jun Hyuk, beginning at 6:30 that morning. One text message sent 9 minutes ago. Come home. We need to talk. She put the phone in her coat pocket without responding. Seo Rin watched her. He's awake, Seo Rin said. Yes. And he went back to the apartment. Yes. And he found you gone. Yes. Seo Rin looked at her with something that might have been, in a different context, almost admiration. Then we should move quickly, she said. They got in the car, and Amara's phone kept buzzing in her pocket, and the gray morning opened up around them as they drove back into the city. Park Min-seok lived on the upper floor of a small building near Busan's old port district, in the kind of neighborhood that had once been working class and had been recently discovered by people with money who liked the aesthetic of it without the inconvenience of its history. His apartment was neat and dense with the accumulation of a long professional life shelves of legal texts, stacked case files from decades ago, the particular organized clutter of a man who had handled other people's secrets for 50 years and kept meticulous records of his own. He opened the door and saw Seo Rin, and his face did the thing that faces do when they have been waiting a long time to be confronted with something and have started to believe it might never happen. Seo Rin, he said. I need you to tell her what you told me, Seo Rin said, about the document. Min-seok looked at Amara, then at the documents she was carrying, then back at Seo Rin. Come in, he said. He stepped back from the door. He moved slowly, the way old men move when they've decided not to resist something anymore. I should have called you years ago. I told myself I was protecting a client. I've had time since to understand that I was protecting myself. He sat down across from them in his small living room and folded his hands on his knees and looked at the signed document that Amara laid on the table. I was in the room when Daewon signed that, he said. I was one of the witnesses. He looked at his own signature on the page. I watched Jun Hyuk take it from his father's safe the day after the funeral. I was there. He looked at it and he put it in his briefcase, and he never mentioned it to me again. He was quiet for a moment. When he brought me along to the meeting with you, he said to Seo Rin, and he told you there was nothing signed, I said nothing. I sat in that room and I said nothing. Seo Rin looked at him without expression. Why, she said. Because I was afraid of him, Min-seok said simply. Because I had seen what happened to people who said the wrong thing at the wrong time inside that family. Because I had a wife and 2 sons. He looked at his hands. None of those are good reasons. They are the reasons I have. Amara was already thinking about what this meant structurally. A witness document. A witness who was alive and willing to testify. The document itself. The corporate payment record she had photographed. The letter from day one. The shape of it was becoming clear. Jun Hyuk had not just hidden his sister. He had used his father's own company to do it. He had misrepresented the legal situation to her directly and with a professional witness present. He had processed what amounted to a coercive settlement offer through corporate funds in a way that created a liability for Baekhyun Holdings that the organization's board, whatever legitimate oversight it had never been informed of. She was pulling the thread, and at the other end of the thread she was beginning to understand was not just a family secret. It was a pattern. The pattern a man used when he had decided that his version of reality was the only one that was allowed to exist, and had spent years building the infrastructure to enforce that decision. Her phone buzzed again. This time the text said, Amara, I know you're in Busan. I know you went to Seo Rin. Whatever she's told you, we need to talk before you do anything with it. Please, she read it twice. He said, I know you went to Seo Rin. Not who is Seo Rin. Not why are you in Busan. He had known exactly where she would go, which meant he had known, from the moment he found her gone this morning, exactly what she had found. He was not surprised. He was managing. She set the phone, face down Min Se-euk's table. She set the phone document and looked at the signed documents of the corporate records and the old man sitting across from her with his hands folded and the weight of 8 years of silence on him. And she felt the first contraction. It was early. Her due date was 6 weeks away. The sensation was not what she had expected, not dramatic, not sharp, but a deep, insistent pressure that moved through her entire lower body with the slow authority of something that did not intend to be ignored. She did not say anything immediately. She breathed. Then she said very calmly, I need to get to a hospital. Seo Rin was on her feet before the sentence finished. The contraction lasted 40 seconds. Amara knew because she counted. That was what she did when her body was doing. Something frightening she counted, she measured, she turned the uncontrollable into data. Because data had edges, and edges meant you could hold onto something. 40 seconds, then it eased, and she sat very still in Park Min Se-euk's chair and breathed through her nose and waited to see if there was another one. Seo Rin was already at the door. There's a private clinic 20 minutes from here, she said. I know the doctor, she's good. Not a private clinic, Amara said. Hospital, a real one. If we go to a hospital, they'll log your name. I know. And Jun Hyuk. I know. Amara pushed herself up from the chair slowly, one hand on the armrest, the other pressed flat against the underside of her stomach. The pressure had receded but left a dull ache behind it, the kind that felt like a warning rather than a symptom. I know he'll find out where I am. That's fine. He was going to find out anyway. She picked up the documents from the table and looked at Min Se-euk. These need to go somewhere safe. Not with me. Not with her. Min Se-euk stood. He had the look of a man who had spent 8 years waiting for the moment when the thing he'd done wrong would require something of him, and had arrived at it now with a kind of grim relief. I have a fireproof safe in the back room. Original documents stay here. I'll make copies first. How long? 20 minutes. Do it now. He moved faster than she expected for his age. Seo Rin came to her side and put a hand under her elbow, not demanding, just available. And Amara accepted it without comment because there was no version of pride worth the alternative. Her legs were steady. The contraction had been strong but isolated. She told herself, one does not mean labor. One means warning. Stay with it. She watched Min Se-euk's hands at the copy machine in the back room, the pages going through one at a time, and she thought about the text message on her phone. I know you went to Seo Rin. The precision of it. The speed. She had been gone less than 6 hours, and he already knew exactly where she was. He has someone watching her, she said. Seo Rin looked at her. Jun Hyuk. He has someone watching your bookstore or watching this area. He knew I was here too fast for it to be a guess. Seo Rin's expression didn't change, but something behind it tightened. I always assumed he might. I stopped caring eventually. There was nothing to see. I opened the store. I closed the store. I don't cause problems. You existed. For him, that was enough. The copy machine stopped. Min Se-euk came back with 2 sets of documents, handed the copies to Seo Rin, and put the originals in a large envelope that he sealed and initialed across the flap. He went to the back room, and she heard a heavy door open and the sound of a combination being dialed, and then the door again. When he came back, his hands were empty. They're in the safe, he said. I'm the only one who knows the combination. If something happens to me, he paused. And the way he said it was matter of fact. The way a man says things when he has been adjacent to dangerous people long enough that danger has become an ordinary noun. There's a letter with my son in Daegu that will tell him where to find them and what they are. Amara nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me. I should have done this 8 years ago. Another contraction came. This one was harder. She gripped the back of the chair and did not make a sound, which took effort, not because the pain was unbearable, but because her body wanted to react, and she was not going to let it react in front of these 2 people, until she had said everything she needed to say. She counted. 50 seconds this time. 10 seconds longer than the first. When it passed, Seo Rin was already on her phone calling someone. We go now, Seo Rin said. The hospital was a large public facility near the center of Busan, the kind with long fluorescent corridors and the specific controlled chaos of a building that never entirely stopped moving. They took her in through emergency intake, and a nurse got her onto a bed in a curtained bay and asked questions in Korean that Amara answered Korean, and nurse's expression shifted slightly. The small recalibration people did when they realized the woman in front of them spoke the language and had been listening to everything. The contractions were irregular. The OB on call, a compact woman in her 40s named Dr. Shin, examined her and said the word preterm, in a tone that was clinical rather than alarmed. Explained that irregular contractions at 34 weeks were not uncommon in situations of significant physical or emotional stress, and that they would monitor her for several hours before making any decisions about intervention. The baby is not in immediate distress, Dr. Shin said, but you need to be horizontal, and you need to stay calm. I'm calm, Amara said. Dr. Shin looked at her with the particular expression of a doctor who has heard that sentence many times from patients who were visibly not calm. The hospital will need to contact your emergency contact, the nurse said, looking at the intake form. Your husband? Yes, Amara said. She had listed him. A sound like green wood splitting, not because she wanted him here, but because they were still legally married. And because their child, the one currently pressing against her ribs with what felt like deliberate indignation, deserved to have his father contacted. Whatever she thought of Junhyuk, that was not something she was going to take from him. You can contact him. She gave them the number. Then she lay back on the hospital bed and looked at the ceiling and waited. Siwent sat in the chair beside the bed and did not offer comfort in words, which was the right instinct. She simply sat there, present and quiet, and that was enough. Amara thought about what she knew. The signed document established Seo Rin's legal claim. Min Seok's testimony established that Jun Hyuk knew about it and lied. Established that he used Betrayal Holdings to process what was effectively a fraudulent settlement offer because it had been offered under false pretenses on the basis of information Jun Hyuk knew to be wrong. That was the civil case. That was the family law case. That was Seo Rin's story. But Amara had been a financial strategist for 12 years, and she had looked at enough corporate structures to know that the Betrayal Holdings payment was not just a moral problem. It was a structural one. A company that processed personal expenses through its corporate accounts was a company with governance problems. A sound like Greenwood's problem, a company with governance and a criminal organization's management structure, was a company that attracted a specific type of external attention. She had been looking at this as a family matter. She was beginning to understand it was bigger than that. She closed her eyes, another contraction building, slower this time, cresting and receding like something far out at sea. She breathed through it. Her phone was in her bag beside the bed. She had not checked it since leaving Min Seok's apartment. She checked it now. 31 missed calls. The last one was from a number she didn't recognize. There was one text from that number, sent 40 minutes ago, Mrs. Kang. My name is Lee Yun-woo. I was the financial director of Betrayal Holdings until 8 months ago. I have information you need to see. Please do not share this number with your husband. Amara read the message twice. Then she looked at the ceiling. Lee Yun-woo. She searched her memory. The name had appeared in the Betrayal Holdings documents she had looked at in the study, not prominently, but in the financial records. Former financial director. Removed from the position 8 months ago, which she had noted because changes in financial leadership at organizations like Betrayal were rarely administrative. They were usually protective. Either the person leaving had done something wrong, or they had seen something wrong. And in both cases, they were moved out to limit the exposure. She typed back, "How did you get this number?" The response came in under a minute. "I've been watching the situation for some time. I know what you found in the study. I know where you are. I have documents that go beyond what you currently have. There is something about your husband you don't know yet. Something that concerns you directly. Can we meet?" She read the last part again. "Something that concerns you directly." She typed, "What does that mean?" "Not over text. In person. I'm in Busan. I can be wherever you are in an hour." She looked at Seo Rin. "There's a man," she said quietly. "Lee Hyun-woo. Did your father ever mention that name?" Seo Rin thought about it. "No. He was Betrayal's financial director until 8 months ago. He's in Busan." He says he has documents, and that there's something about Jun Hyuk I don't know yet. She held the phone out so Seo Rin could read the messages. He says it concerns me directly. Seo Rin read them. Her face stayed still. He could be working for Jun Hyuk, she said. Yes. He could be here to find out what you have. Yes. Or he could be telling the truth. Yes. Amara took the phone back. A man who's working for Jun Hyuk doesn't need to come to me. Jun Hyuk already knows where I am. He's already on his way here. She looked at the messages again. A man who has something real and is scared waits 8 months to use it and then moves the minute the situation changes. Sirin was quiet. He's scared, Amara said. That's what this reads like. Someone who's been sitting on something for 8 months waiting for the right moment and decided this is it. Can you meet him? You're in a hospital bed. He can come here. She typed the address. Lee Hunwoo arrived 55 minutes later. He was younger than she expected, mid-40s, with the slightly hollowed look of a man who had been under sustained stress for a long time and had gotten used to it as a permanent condition. He wore a good coat that was slightly too large for him now, as though he'd bought it when he was heavier and hadn't replaced it. He carried a hard-sided briefcase that he held close to his body in the way people hold things they are not willing to set down. He stopped at the curtain of her bay and looked at her in the hospital bed and at Seo Rin in the chair beside her, and something in his face shifted relief. Maybe, or the particular expression of a man who had been constructing this moment in his head for a long time and was now confronting the reality that it would not be as clean as the construction. You're actually here, he said. I'm here, Amara said. Sit down and tell me what you have. He sat. He put the briefcase on his knees and did not open it immediately. He looked at his hands for a moment. I left Betrayal 8 months ago, he said. Jun Hyuk told the board it was a mutual decision. It wasn't. He found out I had been keeping copies of certain financial records. Not for blackmail. I want to be clear about that I was not building leverage. I was building protection. Because I had seen enough inside that organization to know that when things fell apart, the financial director was always the one who took the criminal liability. What kind of records? Amara asked. He opened the briefcase. The documents were organized in labeled folders, the habit of a financial director. Everything categorized, everything cross-referenced. He laid 3 folders on the bed beside her. The first one, he said, is the Seo Rin settlement. Complete internal records, not just the corporate payment, but the legal memos that preceded it. The instructions Jun Hyuk gave to the legal team. The language he approved. The strategy, Amara opened it. Read the first memo. Her stomach tightened. The memo was addressed to Betrayal's legal team, from Jun Hyuk directly. It outlined the objective permanently terminate Han Seo Rin's claim to any Kang family inheritance and the strategy present the settlement as a generous good faith offer in the absence of any legally binding documentation, while ensuring Ms. Han understood the futility of challenging the Kong family's legal resources. Present the settlement in the absence of legally binding documentation. He had known about the signed document when he wrote that memo. He had written the strategy for hiding it in the same hand he used to instruct lawyers to tell Seo Rin it didn't exist. The second folder, Hyunwoo said. The second folder was thicker. Amara opened it and saw the header on the first page and went very still. It was a legal strategy document prepared by Jun Hyuk's private attorneys. It was dated 11 months ago, before Christmas, before any of this, before she had found the message on the tablet or packed her bag or driven south in the dark. The document outlined custody strategies in the event of a divorce from Amara Whitmore Kang. It was comprehensive. It covered financial disclosure limitations, what he was legally required to share, and what could be structured to remain undisclosed. It covered the public narrative, how the separations would be framed to media if it became public. A sound like Greenwood splitting. It covered the issue of her professional standing, specifically the question of whether her financial work during the marriage could be characterized in ways that limited her claims. It covered the child. The section on the child ran to 4 pages. Amara read it without moving. The strategy was not about giving him more time with his son. It was about control. Controlling the legal framework. Controlling the financial environment she would operate in after the divorce. Controlling what their child knew about the circumstances of the separation. There was a line she read it twice to make sure she had read it correctly about the advisability establishing paternal primary residence on the basis of the mother's instability during the final months of pregnancy. Her instability. He had been planning to use her pregnancy against her, before Christmas, before the message on the tablet, before she had done anything at all except be pregnant with his child in the home they shared. He had been planning this. She put the folder down very carefully. The third folder, she said. Her voice came out flat and precise, and she was grateful for the 12 years of professional training that had taught her to make her voice do what she needed it to do, regardless of what was happening in her chest. Hyunwoo hesitated. The third folder is different, he said. The first two are about the family matters. The third, he stopped. The third is why I left, not why he removed me. Why I actually decided I needed to get out. He handed it to her. She opened it. The first page was a financial flow document, the kind she had built herself dozens of times, mapping the movement of money through corporate structures. She understood the format immediately. She had to read the content 3 times before she understood what she was looking at. Betrayal Holdings had a subsidiary. The subsidiary had a subsidiary. 3 layers down, there was a shell company registered in a jurisdiction that did not ask questions, and that shell company had been receiving regular transfers from a source that was not Betrayal's legitimate business operations. She followed the flow. The money was coming from 3 separate criminal enterprises that had, for the past 4 years, been operating under agreements with the Betrayal organization. Not partnerships, not alliances. Something closer to a protection arrangement. Pay into the structure, receive Betrayal's immunity from interference, and your operations continue. That was not new information about organizations like Betrayal. That was how they worked. What was new was where the money went after the shell company received it. She followed the arrows on the flowchart. The money was being split. The larger portion went back into Betrayal's legitimate operations in the normal way. But a consistent percentage routed through a second shell, then a third ended up in an account that she recognized. She recognized it because she had seen it before. In Jun Hyuk's personal financial records, which she had limited access to but had looked at twice during the marriage, when they were doing tax planning together. It was his personal account, not a business account, not a corporate account. His personal holdings account, the one he maintained separately from the Betrayal organizational funds, the one that was supposed to represent his legitimate personal wealth, separate from the criminal organization, clean enough that it could be reported and taxed and used in ways that didn't require explanation. He was skimming from his own organization. He was taking money from the criminal enterprises, under Betrayal's protection, running it through 3 shells and depositing it into his personal accounts while reporting it as legitimate investment income. He was stealing from his own criminal empire and hiding it as personal wealth. Amara looked up from the document. Hyunwoo was watching her. His own people don't know, he said. The Betrayal leadership structure, his lieutenants, the men who run the divisions, they all believe the protection fees go entirely back into the organization. They don't know about the personal extraction. They've never seen the full flow. He paused. If they found out, they'd move against him, Amara said, immediately. You don't steal from your own organization in that world. It's the one thing they don't forgive. He'd be removed. Violently. She looked back at the document. The numbers were substantial. 4 years of consistent extraction. The personal account had grown in a way that could not be explained by his legitimate salary from the Betrayal executive structure. Why are you giving me this? She asked. Because he's going to come for you, Hyunwoo said. Whatever you've found about Seo Rin, whatever you think your leverage is, it's not enough. He has lawyers that will bury a family inheritance case for years. He has judges and prosecutors who owe him things I can't name. The Seo Rin's documents are right, and they're real, but they won't protect you from a man with his resources. He leaned forward slightly. This will. Because if this information reaches his organization, or reaches the authorities who have been trying to build a case against Betrayal for 6 years, he loses everything. Not in court. Not slowly, immediately. Amara looked at him. You've been sitting on this for 8 months, she said. Yes. Why now? Because 8 months ago, I had no one to give it to who could use it properly. I'm an accountant, not a lawyer, and not a criminal. I needed someone who understood what it meant and had a reason to act on it and wasn't afraid of him. He met her eyes. You left your home on Christmas Eve, 8 months pregnant, and drove to Busan with documents you took from his study. You're not afraid of him." Amara was quiet. She looked at the folder in her hands, the document inside it, the numbers on the flow chart. She thought about the custody strategy document in the second folder. Maternal instability during final months of pregnancy. He had been building a case against her, before she had done anything to give him a reason. She had been living in that apartment and sleeping in that apartment and sleeping in that bed and eating breakfast across from him. And he had already decided she was going to be managed out of the situation when the baby was born. She thought about Seo Rin, who had been offered money to accept a lie. She thought about Min Seok, who had sat in a room while the lie was told and said nothing for 8 years. She thought about a wooden box on the bottom shelf of a study with a fountain pen and a brass key and a letter that had never been sent. Scene. She thought about Jun Hyuk standing in the dark of their bedroom and telling her that stress and pregnancy were affecting her judgment. Another contraction came. This one was different from the others, sharper, more centralized, the kind that made her breath catch in a way the previous ones hadn't. She gripped the bed rail and counted, and it lasted 65 seconds, and when it passed, she was sweating slightly, and her hands were not quite steady. Seorin stood up and pressed the call button for the nurse. "You need to rest," she said to Amara. "I need 5 more minutes. You need to rest." The nurse came in and took one look at the situation, the woman in the hospital bed, the briefcase, the documents, the 2 visitors, and her professional face went firm. "You need to clear the room," she said to Yoon Woo and Seo Rin. "I need to examine her." Hyun Woo started gathering his folders. "Leave the third one," Amara said. He looked at her. "Leave it," she said. "I need to think about what's in it." He hesitated, then set the folder on the small table beside the bed and took the rest and closed the briefcase. He stood. "There's one more thing," he said, "something I didn't put in the documents because I couldn't prove it. I still can't prove it." He looked at his hands again, the gesture of a man steeling himself. The 3 criminal enterprises that were paying into the protection arrangement, the ones whose money was being extracted. 8 months ago, before he removed me, I noticed that one of them had been transferred. Not terminated, transferred. The organization was handed to a new handler inside the Betrayal structure. "Transferred to who?" Amara said. "To a lieutenant named Seo Yuna," he said. The name landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Amara did not move. "She's not just a woman he's having an affair with," Hyun Woo said quietly. "She's inside the organization. She runs one of the protection extraction points. She's been inside Betrayal for 3 years." He paused. "The transfer happened 4 months before Christmas. 4 months before Christmas. 4 months before the message on the tablet. 4 months before Amara had found the name Seo Yuna for the first time and thought she was looking at an affair. He didn't give her the enterprise as a gift," Amara said. The words came out slowly. The way words come out when your brain is processing something faster than your mouth can keep up. He gave it to her because she was already embedded. She was already part of the structure he was hiding. She looked at the ceiling. The affair and the financial fraud are the same thing. Hyun Woo nodded once. "She knows about the extraction," Amara said. "She's been part of it." "I believe so. I couldn't prove it before I was removed. But the timing is enough," Amara said. He left. The nurse came back and examined her, and her expression when she looked from the examination was the expression that medical professionals cultivate specifically to convey information without causing panic, which meant the information was not good. "The contractions are getting closer together, doctor," Shin said, coming in behind the nurse. "You're at 34 weeks. We're not in crisis territory, but you are in preterm labor, and I am not comfortable letting this continue without intervention. We're going to give you medication to try to slow the contractions, and I need you to be fully reclined, and I need you to stop doing whatever you were just doing." "I understand," Amara said. "Do you want us to try to reach your husband again?" "He hasn't returned the hospital's calls." Amara looked at the ceiling. He hadn't returned the calls. She lay back against the pillow and felt the exhaustion of the last 20 hours settle over her. The weight of the drive and the storage unit and Min Seok's apartment and the hospital room and the 3 folders is the name Seo. Yuna spoken in the context that changed everything. She had come south looking for a woman named Seo Rin. She had found something that changed the entire shape of her marriage, her pregnancy, her safety, and the legal situation of a man who had already begun planning how to manage her out of her own child's life. The contraction medication moved through her IV, and the contractions began to ease slightly. Not gone, but quieter, moved to the background, her body grudgingly cooperating. Seo-rin came back in after the nurse left and sat down in the chair. She didn't say anything. Neither did Amara. After a while, Amara said he knew about the signed document. Yes. He lied to you directly, with a witness present, using his company's money. Yes. And he's been stealing from his own organization for 4 years, and using the woman I thought was his affair partner to do it. Seo-rin was quiet. The affair is almost the least of it, Amara said. She turned her head to look at her. He was going to use my pregnancy to establish maternal instability in the custody case. He was planning it before I had any idea any of this existed. Seo-rin's jaw tightened. Just slightly. The first crack in the evenness. He had everything arranged, she said. He thought he did. Amara looked at the folder on the table. He didn't know about Yun Wu. He didn't know the financial records existed outside his control. She paused. He also didn't know that I was going to leave on Christmas Eve. He thought I was going to stay. You almost did. Yes, Amara said simply. I almost did. She looked at the ceiling again and thought about the version of herself who had almost stayed, who had rolled back over in bed and told herself she would address it in the morning, who had watched the door close and decided it was too late and too dark and too much effort to pick up and go. That woman would still be in the apartment right now, waiting, just as Jun Hyuk had counted on her to do. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her. She looked at it. It was not Jun Hyuk's number. It was from an international number she didn't recognize, with a country code she identified after a moment as the United States. The text was in English. Mrs. Kang, my name is Special Agent Diana Reyes, Financial Crimes Enforcement, U.S. Treasury. We've been monitoring Betrayal Holdings' international transactions for 18 months. We believe you may have recently come into possession of documents relevant to our investigation. If you're willing to speak with me, please call this number. This is not a threat. You are not a target, but your safety may depend on what you decide in the next 24 hours. Amara read the message. Then she read it again. She set the phone face down on the table. 18 months. The Americans had been watching for 18 months, and Jun Hyuk was somewhere in Seoul not answering the hospital's calls, with no idea that his financial director had spent 8 months building an archive, that his wife had spent one night pulling a thread, and that a U.S. federal agent was waiting on the other end of a phone number for her to decide what to do next. She picked the phone back up and looked at the number. 24 hours. She looked at Seo-rin. I need you to go get the copies from Min Seok, she said. All of them. And I need you to bring them here to tonight. Seo-rin stood without asking why. That was when the door to the hospital room opened. Amara looked up expecting a nurse. It was not a nurse. It was Jun Hyuk. He was still wearing the coat. From last night, the one he had buttoned in the dark of their bedroom while she pretended to sleep, and his face had the particular quality it got when he had been moving fast and was working to not show it, controlled. Yes. But at the edges of the control something that was almost afraid. He stopped when he saw Seo-rin. Seo-rin stopped when she saw him. The three of them held a moment of silence. That was nothing like silence. It was full of 8 years of marriage and 60 years of a family that had refused to acknowledge itself, and the documents on the table and the phone in Amara's hand, and the name of a federal agent waiting in the recent texts. Jun Hyuk looked at Amara. His eyes moved to the folder on the table. He recognized it. She saw the recognition happen, the slight shift in his face, the way his eyes went to it and came back to her, and the calculation happened behind his expression in the space of a breath. Amara, he said. She's in preterm labor, Seo-rin said to him. Her voice was very even. She needs to rest. He looked at Seo-rin. He had not looked at her yet, and when he did, it was the look of a man confronting something he had believed he had successfully put away, the look of a locked door that had been standing locked for years and was now open. I need to speak with my wife, he said. Your wife is in a hospital bed, Seo-rin said, because she drove to Busan alone in the middle of the night, because you walked out. Something moved across his face. Not guilt. Something more complicated than guilt. He looked at Amara again. I'm sorry, he said. And she heard something real in it, not managed, not strategic, actual pain, which was almost worse than if it had been calculated, because actual pain meant he understood what he had done and had done it anyway. Amara looked at him from the hospital bed. She thought about the custody strategy document. Maternal instability during final months of pregnancy. He had written that before Christmas. He had already decided she was going to be managed. She thought about Seo Rin standing beside her chair. She thought about the federal agent's number in her phone. He closed it. "Sit down," she said. He looked at the chair where Seo Rin had been sitting. "Seo Rin," Amara said, "can you give us a few minutes?" Seo Rin looked at her. "I'm fine," Amara said. "I promise." Seo Rin walked past Jun Hyuk to the door without looking at him. The door closed. Amara and Jun Hyuk were alone in the hospital room, for the first time since she had said, "If you walk out that door," and he had walked out anyway. She looked at her husband. He looked at the folder on the table and then at her, and she could see him doing what he always did, assessing, calculating, deciding how much to give. "Before you say anything," she said, "I need you to understand something. I know about the signed document. I know about the payment through the holdings. I know about the custody strategy you filed 11 months ago." She watched his face. "And I know about the extraction accounts." The controlled expression fractured, just for a second. But she saw it. For the first time in 6 years of marriage, she saw Kang Jun Hyuk genuinely afraid. The silence lasted maybe 4 seconds. 4 seconds where Jun Hyuk stood between the door and the bed, and his face did something she had never seen it do. In 6 years it went unguarded. Not for long. The training of a lifetime kicked back in before she had fully finished cataloging what she'd seen. But it had happened, and they both knew it had happened, and that knowledge sat between them like a third person in the room. He pulled the chair away from the wall and sat down. He did not reach for her hand. He understood, she thought, that reaching for her hand would be a mistake right now. He sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands loosely clasped, and he looked at the floor for a moment before looking at her. "How much do you have?" he said. That's not what you think. Let me explain. Not the management language she had been bracing for. Just how much do you have?" "Enough," she said. "That's not specific." "I know." He looked at the folder on the table. She had left it there deliberately, visible but closed, because she wanted him to know it existed and to not know exactly what was in it. Information about information was its own kind of leverage. "The extraction accounts," he said. He said it the way you say a medical diagnosis, not denying it, just tasting the word to understand what it meant that someone else was using it. "Who gave you that? Does it matter?" "Yes." "Why? Because you want to know who to move against." He flinched. Small, but real. "I'm trying to understand the situation," he said. "I'll tell you the situation." She shifted against the pillow because even now, even in this conversation, her body was making its own demands, the dull ache of the quieted contractions, the weight of the baby, the bone-deep exhaustion of 20 hours of movement and revelation and fear, kept carefully below the surface. "You have been stealing from your own organization for 4 years. The men who work for you, who are loyal to you, who have built their lives around the structure you run, they don't know. If they found out, you would not survive it." His jaw tightened. "You also lied to your half-sister about your father's signed document, which is a fraud that was facilitated through Betrayal Holdings, which means it is a corporate liability that your board has never been informed of." She kept her voice level. "And 11 months ago, before Christmas, before any of this, you filed a custody strategy with your private attorneys that characterized my pregnancy as evidence of maternal instability." He closed his eyes. Jun Hyuk. She waited until he opened them. "You were planning to take my son from me before he was born. That is not what that document, I read it. Every page. Don't tell me what it was." He stopped. The fluorescent light above them hummed. Somewhere in the corridor outside the curtain, a cart moved past, wheels squeaking on linoleum. Someone's shoes. A murmured exchange between nurses. The solitary sound of a building full of people who were not in this room having this conversation. "The document was a contingency," he said, "not a plan. The document was dated 11 months ago. We were still sharing a bed 11 months ago. You were still kissing me goodbye in the morning 11 months ago." She looked at him directly. "A contingency is something you prepare when a situation becomes uncertain. We were not uncertain 11 months ago. I thought we were fine." He was quiet. "So I need you to tell me when," she said. "When did I become a contingency?" He looked at her for a long moment. She saw it again, that thing under the control. The thing that was not quite guilt and not quite grief, but lived in the territory between them. the thing she had spent 6 years trying to reach and had never been able to get to directly. After the pregnancy was confirmed, he said finally, "She waited. I was afraid," he said, "not of you, of what it meant. A child changes the math of everything." I started thinking about what the exposure would look like: a child connected to the organization, a woman connected to me who could be used as leverage, the legal complications if the marriage didn't hold. He paused. I started planning before I had any reason to think the marriage wouldn't hold, because that's what I do. I plan ahead of the problem. You planned to take my child before there was a problem. I planned to protect the organization. From me. He said nothing. "I was your wife," she said. "I was carrying your son, and I was a risk to be managed. That is not..." She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. That is exactly what it is. The same way Seo Rin was a risk to be managed. The same way Hyun Woo was a risk to be managed. The same way anyone who knew something inconvenient became something to move out of the way. She looked at him. "You don't destroy people who betray you, Jun Hyuk. You destroy people who become inconvenient. There's a difference. Betrayal would mean you expected something from them. Inconvenience just means they exist." He stood up. He walked to the window. The room had a small window that looked out onto the hospital's interior courtyard. Gray concrete and a bare tree in December, and he stood there with his back to her, and she watched his shoulders. And the way he was breathing, and she thought, he is trying not to break. He is trying to hold the structure of himself together. She had seen him do it before. She had always thought it was discipline. She understood now that it was also armor. "I'm not going to fight you," he said to the window. "I know. The documents you have are secure, not with me, not with Seo Rin. Somewhere you cannot reach them." He turned around. "Who else has seen the extraction accounts? That's what you're worried about. That is an extremely legitimate thing to be worried about. More legitimate than the fact that your wife is in preterm labor in a hospital in Busan while you are not answering calls." He looked at her with something raw. "I came," he said. "You came when it was convenient. When you'd already decided you needed to know what I had." She held his gaze. "The hospital called you hours ago. You didn't answer. I know what you were doing." She said it without anger, which was what gave it its particular weight. "You were with her. And then you decided the situation here required more attention. So you came." She shifted again, pressing one hand against her side where the ache was sharpest. "You should know that she's not what you thought she was. Seo Yuna, the extraction account transfer, 4 months before Christmas. She's been inside the financial structure the entire time." He went very still. "She's been using the affair as cover," Amara said. "Or maybe the affair was real, and the financial relationship was also real, and you were stupid enough to mix them. I don't know which. But your men don't know about either, and if they found out about both at the same time..." "Stop." His voice came out sharper than he intended. He caught it, pulled it back. "Stop. You need to hear this. I know what I need." He turned back to the window. His hands were at his sides. She could see the tension in them from across the room. Fingers slightly curled, the knuckles of his right hand pressing white against each other. "I know what this looks like. I know what you have. I know that you have enough to..." He stopped. Started again. "I know that you have enough. We should talk about what happens next." He turned around again. "After the baby," he said. "We can know." She said it immediately, without hesitation, because she had made this decision somewhere on the highway south of Seoul the night before, and it had not changed, and it was not going to change. Not after the baby now. Because the longer this sits, the more dangerous it gets for both of us. And because your son deserves to be born into a situation that's been decided, not one that's still being negotiated. He looked at her. She looked back. "Divorce," she said. "Straightforward. No custody war. Reasonable access for you as his father, not what's in that strategy document, something fair that we actually negotiate. Seo Rin gets what your father intended. The personal estate, the acknowledgement, the name." She paused, and the extraction accounts get restructured into legitimacy under independent oversight before any external party has cause to examine them more closely. He was very still. "You're threatening to expose the accounts," he said. "I'm telling you that if we go to war, things become visible that are currently invisible. I am not threatening you. I am describing the logical consequences of the alternative. That's the same thing. Maybe. But the difference in language matters to me right now, so let's keep it." He sat back down. He sat down heavily, The way men sit when the thing they've been holding up has become too heavy to keep holding. And he put his face in his hands for a moment, just a moment, and she watched him do it and felt the complicated grief of watching someone you loved show you the part of themselves that was actually human. After spending years showing you only the architecture, she did not soften. She could not afford to soften. Your men will find out about the extraction eventually, she said quietly, whether it's from me or from someone else. Hyun Woo has been sitting on those records for 8 months. He came to me because I was the first person who gave him an opening. Before me, it could have been anyone. She paused. The safest version of your future is the one where the accounts are restructured before anyone looks. The organization undergoes oversight that you control the framing of, and the family matters are settled privately. That version exists, but it requires you to agree to it now. He looked up from his hands, and Seo Yuna, he said, that's your problem to solve, not mine. Something moved across his face, something she couldn't fully name, the expression of a man confronting the fact that the woman he had underestimated had in 20 hours assembled more leverage than his entire legal team had anticipated. He stood again. This time he moved toward the door. I need time, he said. You have until tomorrow morning. He stopped. That's not enough time to...
Tomorrow morning, she said.
Because I am not the only person who knows what's in those folders, and I am not able to control how long the other people stay quiet. Tomorrow morning, Jun-hyuk, give me your answer. He stood at the door with his hand on the frame and did not look back at her, and she looked at his back and thought, there it is. The last time I will look at him and still be his wife. Not in a legal sense that would take months, but in this sense, in the sense of the thing they had been to each other in the dark of their apartment and the early mornings and the years when she had believed that loving a difficult man would eventually reach the part of him worth reaching. He walked out. The door did not slam. It never slammed. Seo Rin came back in 40 seconds later, as though she had been standing just outside. Well, she said. He'll agree, Amara said. He needs tonight to think he has a choice. But he'll agree. How do you know? Amara looked at the window where Jun-hyuk had stood, because the extraction accounts are the only thing that actually scares him. Not the family matter. Not Seo Yuna. The accounts. Because if his people find out, there's no legal strategy, no lawyer, no judge that protects him. The organization moves on its own logic. She looked at Seo Rin. He'll agree because agreeing is the only version where he keeps his empire. Seo Rin sat down, and if he doesn't, Amara picked up her phone. She opened the text from the number with the American country code. She read the name again. Special Agent Diana Reyes. Financial Crimes Enforcement. Then I make a phone call, she said. She did not sleep well. Nobody slept well in hospitals. The lights were wrong, the sounds were wrong. The bed had the particular institutional firmness that communicated you are not home in every pressure point. The contraction medication was doing its job. The baby was stable. Dr. Shin had come in at 10 that night and said they were not in immediate crisis but that she would need to stay for observation through the morning. Seo Rin slept in the chair. Amara watched the ceiling and thought. At 2 in the morning, she picked up her phone and called her mother. Her mother answered. On the third ring, it was noon in Atlanta. She would be cleaning up after lunch and said baby, in a voice that meant she already knew something was wrong. I'm in a hospital in Busan, Amara said. Are you hurt? Is it the baby? Preterm contractions. They've slowed them down. We're okay. A pause. The particular silence of a mother recalibrating from fear to assessment. What happened? Her mother said. A lot. I'll tell you all of it later. But I need you to know where I am. Do you need me to come? Amara looked at the ceiling. Not yet, she said. But soon. Maybe soon. Amara. Her mother's voice was careful, and the voice of a woman who had raised her daughter alone after Amara's father left, and had never once told her daughter that love was easy, or that the right person would make everything simple. Are you leaving him? Yes, she said. Another pause. Good, her mother said. Just that. No elaboration. No, I told you so. Just the single flat word of a woman who had kept her opinion to herself for 6 years and was not going to make a production of being right. Amara almost laughed. I love you, she said. Love you too. Call me when something changes. She put the phone down and looked at Seo Rin asleep in the chair. This woman she had known for less than 24 hours, who had become in some way she couldn't fully articulate the most honest relationship she had in Korea. the most real, and she thought about what it meant that they had found each other through a letter in a wooden box and two identical brass keys, and the particular accident of June Hyuk being the kind of man who kept things he should have destroyed. She fell asleep around 3. She woke up at 6 when her phone rang. It was not June Hyuk. It was number she didn't recognize Korean local, and she answered it because she had learned in the last 24 hours that unknown numbers were worth answering. Mrs. Kang. A man's voice, low and careful. My name is Baek Sung-jin. I am the senior director of the Betrayal Holdings Board. She was immediately entirely awake. How did you get this number? She said. Your husband gave it to me, he said. I want you to know that I'm calling without his knowledge as of this morning. He called me last night to discuss. He called it a family restructuring, but the conversation raised concerns that require me to act independently. A pause. Mrs. Kang, your husband told me last night that there are documents in existence that expose certain internal financial practices. He told me these documents were in your possession. The extraction accounts. June Hyuk had told his own board. She sat up in the bed, slowly, trying not to wake Seo-rin. He told you, she said. He was, I believe, attempting to get ahead of the situation, to frame the documents as he used the word fabricated. Another pause. I have worked alongside Kang June Hyuk for 11 years. I know what fabricated evidence looks like in our industry, and I know what a man looks like when he is trying to move something out of the way. He looked like the second thing. The voice was careful and flat and professional, and underneath it something that was maybe not quite anger, but its more experienced cousin. I need to know what the documents actually contain. Why should I tell you? Because the board has a responsibility to the organization that supersedes any individual member's protection of their personal interests, including the chairman's. A beat. And because if the documents are what I believe they are, then June Hyuk has been moving money from this organization's protection agreements into his personal accounts for 4 years, and every man and woman in this structure who trusted his leadership has been operating under a false premise. Amara looked at Seo-rin, still asleep in the chair. If I tell you what they contain, she said carefully, I need assurances. About my divorce proceeding without obstruction. About the custody arrangement being fair. About Han Seo-rin's claim being recognized. Those are personal family matters. Those are the conditions, she said. I'm not a hostile party. I'm not trying to destroy Betrayal. I don't care about the organization. I care about 3 things, my son, my freedom, and a woman who was lied to and deserves to have that corrected. She paused. The documents stay secure until I have written assurances from the board. After that, how the board uses the information is its business. Silence on the line. Then send me what you have. I will convene an emergency session this morning. I said written assurances first. Another silence. I will have something to you by 9 o'clock. The call ended. Amara sat in the half-dark of the hospital room, her phone in her hand, and took a slow breath. June Hyuk had gone to the board. He had tried to get ahead of it. He had told them the documents were fabricated, which meant he knew exactly what was in the 3rd folder, which meant he had known Hyunwoo kept records, which meant he had spent 8 months knowing the records existed and believing he had managed the situation by removing Hyunwoo. He had moved too fast last night. She had given him the night, and instead of sitting with it, he had moved the same instinct that made him dangerous and made him effective, and was right now making him sloppy. He had told the board, which meant the board was now involved, which meant the organization was now looking at itself. She looked at Seo-rin. Wake up, she said. Seo-rin opened her eyes immediately, the way people do when they have not been sleeping as deeply as they appear. What happened? He went to the board. He told them the documents were fabricated. The senior director just called me. Seo-rin processed this without visible alarm. He panicked, she said. Yes. That's not like him. No, Amara agreed. It's not. She looked at the window. The sky outside was beginning to lighten, the particular pale gray of a winter morning that was not yet willing to commit to day. I think I scared him. I think he went back to Seoul last night and sat with what I knew, and instead of calculating the way he normally calculates, he reacted. He tried to get in front of it, and instead he walked into it. Yes. Seo-rin stood up and stretched the unself-conscious stretch of someone who had slept in chairs before and did not find it remarkable. She looked at Amara. Are you ready for what comes next? Amara thought about it honestly. Her body ached. Her son was pressing against her ribs. She had not eaten a real meal since Christmas Eve dinner alone in the penthouse, and that felt like it had happened to a different person in a different lifetime. And she was in a hospital in Busan, waiting for a crime organization's board to send her written assurances about her divorce. No, she said, but I'm going to do it anyway. The written assurances came at 8:47. They came as a formal document, not legally binding, in the way a court order was binding, but carrying the weight of the organization's board seal and 3 signatures, which in the world Betrayal occupied carried its own species of enforceability. The document agreed to non-interference in the Kang-Whitmore divorce proceedings. It agreed to support reasonable co-parenting access for both parties. It contained at the bottom a single line that Amara had not requested and had not expected. The board recognizes the pending inheritance claim of Han Seo-rin and will cooperate with its legal resolution. She read that line twice. She showed it to Seo-rin. Seo-rin read it. Her face did something complicated and then went still. They're cutting him loose, she said. They're protecting the organization by separating themselves from his personal conduct. Yes. That means they believe the documents. They believed the documents before they saw them. They believed them the moment Jun-yuk called them at midnight and used the word fabricated. Nobody calls something fabricated at midnight unless it's real. Seo-rin looked at the board document in her hands. My name, she said quietly. Your name, Amara confirmed. Seo-rin folded the document with great precision along its original creases. She held it the way she had held the documents in the storage unit, like something that had weight beyond its paper. Amara forwarded Yunwoo's financial flow documents to Baek Sung-jin's number. Then she held her phone for a moment. Then she opened the text from Special Agent Diana Reyes. She typed, I'm willing to speak. Not about my husband's criminal organization. I have no information about its operations. But about the financial extraction accounts and the corporate governance violations. Those I can document. The response came back in 6 minutes. That's exactly what we need. Can you do a call today? Tomorrow, Amara typed. I'm in a hospital and I'm about to have a baby. A pause. Then understood. We'll be here. She put the phone down. The door opened and Dr. Shin came in with a nurse. And Dr. Shin looked at the monitors and looked at Amara and said, the contractions have been stable overnight. The baby's heart rate looks good. But I'd like to do an ultrasound this morning to check positioning. Of course, Amara said. The nurse began setting up the equipment, and Seo-rin moved her chair to make room, and in the middle of all of this, the clinical routine, the beeping monitors, the gray winter light strengthening slowly through the small window, Amara's phone rang. Jun-hyuk. She looked at the name on the screen. She answered. You talked to Sung-jin, he said. His voice was different from last night. The controlled quality was still there but thinner, like something that had been stretched. He called me, she said. That's I know. A pause. I made a mistake last night, going to the board. Yes. He stopped. I was trying to protect the situation. You were trying to protect yourself. Yes. The word came out with something in it she hadn't expected from him. Something unarmored. Yes, I was. Silence. The board has pulled my decision-making authority on 3 divisions pending review, he said. Effective this morning. I heard the assurances document. They moved fast. You gave them reason to move fast. He was quiet for a moment. Amara. His voice had the particular quality of a man who is about to say something that costs him something real. Not in a strategic way, but in the way that actual honesty always costs. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be in a situation where I don't have control of the outcome. I know, she said. I know, Jun-hyuk. Another pause. Is the baby okay? He's okay. They're monitoring us. He stopped. Started again. Can I come back? She looked at Seo-rin. Seo-rin was looking at her with that direct, complete look, not telling her what to do, just being present for whatever she decided. She looked at the ultrasound equipment the nurse was setting up. She thought about what she was going to say very carefully. You can come, she said, but you need to understand something before you walk in this room. You come as his father, not as my husband, not as someone negotiating. His father. That's the only version of you I have room for right now. A long pause. Okay, he said, and Seo-rin is here. She stays. A longer pause. Okay, he said again. He arrived 20 minutes later. He had changed his coat, had gone somewhere. A hotel probably. Had changed and come back, and he looked less wrecked than last night. But the fracture was still visible at the edges. The way a repaired thing always shows its repair if the light is right. He came through the door and stopped when he saw Seo Rin in the chair, the same moment of stillness as last night. But different this time last night, it had been the stillness of strategy. This time it was something more like recognition. He sat in the corner. He did not talk. The nurse moved the ultrasound equipment into place and spread the cold gel on Amara's stomach, and the monitor came to life. And there was the heartbeat, fast and steady and entirely indifferent to the drama of the humans surrounding it, just doing the work of existing, the way the most important things always did. Amara watched the screen. She heard Jun Hyuk exhale from the corner of the room. Dr. Shin said, "Good positioning. Good heart rate. He's doing well." She looked at Amara. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Amara said honestly. "Very tired. That's expected. Rest today. If the contractions stay stable, we may be able to talk about discharge tomorrow." The nurse began cleaning up the equipment. In the silence that followed, Amara looked at the monitor screen, where the image had already faded. She thought about a year from now. Not with hope, exactly hope required a kind of lightness she didn't have today, in this room, in this hospital, with this much wreckage around her, but with something, the specific feeling of a woman who has looked at the shape of her life and understood it clearly for the first time, and is deciding what to do with that clarity. "Junyuk," she said. He looked up from the corner. "When you came here last night," she said, "you said you were sorry. Was that real?" He held her gaze for a moment. "Yes," he said. "Then I need you to be sorry in a specific way. Not to me. To her." She looked at Seo Rin, then back at him. "Before this goes any further legally, before the board review, before any of it, you need to sit in a room with her and say the thing you've been not saying for 8 years, not to settle the legal case. Because she is your father's daughter, and she has been waiting for someone in your family to acknowledge that out loud since before your father died." Jun Hyuk looked at Seo Rin. Seo Rin looked back at him. The room was very quiet. He stood up. He crossed the room slowly and stopped in front of her chair and looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had his father's jaw in his father's eyes and who had been running a bookstore called Haiyan on the coast outside Busan because she had been made to feel that was the size of existence she was allowed, and she looked back at him without moving, without flinching, with the absolute stillness of a person who has been waiting so long that the waiting itself has become a form of dignity. "I knew about the document," he said. "I knew the day after our father died. I read it and I understood what he was telling me." His voice was steady, but something underneath it was not. "I was angry at him for keeping you from us, for spending my entire childhood having a secret that he decided mattered more than our families, than what I thought our family was. I was angry at him and I took it out on you." He paused. "That was wrong. And I knew it was wrong at the time, and I did it anyway." Seo Rin was still. "The money," he said. "The lawyers. Coming to you and lying to your face about the document. Telling you there was nothing signed." He stopped. "I wanted you to go away. I wanted the problem to go away. And you were not a problem. You were—" He stopped again, pressed through it. "You were his daughter. You were my sister. And I treated you like an inconvenience." The word inconvenience came out rougher than the rest of it. Amara had used that word last night. She saw him using it now as a kind of self-indictment. Seo Rin looked at him for a long time. "I know why you did it," she said. Her voice was even. "Understanding why someone hurts you doesn't make it hurt less. But I understand why." She paused. "Your father was not honest with you either. He hid me from you the same way he hid the document. You grew up not knowing I existed, and then found out after he died that he had an entire other daughter and had been managing both situations privately for decades. I understand that the anger had to go somewhere. It should not have gone to you." "No," she agreed. "It should not have." The room held the weight of that for a moment. Then Amara's phone rang. She looked at the screen. "Baek Sung Jin again," she answered, "Mrs. Kang." His voice was different from this morning. Tighter. "The board has completed its emergency review of the documents you forwarded." A pause. "We are implementing immediate independent oversight of Betrayal Holdings' financial operations. Jun Hyuk's executive authority has been suspended pending a full audit." Another pause. "We are also referring certain matters to legal counsel for assessment of voluntary disclosure options." Amara looked at Jun Hyuk. He was watching her face, reading it the way he always read her face, the specific attention of a man who had learned her expressions over years and could track the news in them. She said, "I understand." She said, "Thank you for calling." She ended the call. She looked at her husband. "They've suspended your authority," she said. "Pending audit. They're considering voluntary disclosure." He went very still, not the controlled stillness, the other kind, the kind that came from outside the control, from something deeper than strategy. "How long?" he said. He didn't say. He sat back down in the corner chair. He sat down like a man whose legs had made the decision before his brain did. He put his hands on his knees and looked at the floor, and she watched him absorb the thing that she had told him was coming and that he had known was coming. And that was still when it actually arrived, larger than the knowing. His empire was not gone, but it was no longer his. Not entirely, not in the way it had been. The board was moving, the audit was coming. The voluntary disclosure meant lawyers and federal consideration, and the specific long aftermath of an organization that had decided survival required honesty, however partial and however strategic that honesty was. He had spent his life building something that could not be touched. It had been touched by a letter in a wooden box, by a woman who had driven south in the dark instead of rolling back over in bed. He looked up at her, and in his face she saw finally, after 6 years, after everything, the thing she had been trying to reach. Not guilt, not strategy, not the management of a situation. Just a man looking at the consequences of who he had been, and understanding them, and not being able to do anything about it except sit with what they were. The baby moved, not a contraction. Just movement, the specific insistent interior pressure of a person who existed, and was not waiting for the adults around him to finish their business before he made his presence known. Amara put her hand against her side. She thought, "You're going to be okay. All three of you, in your different ways, are going to be okay." She did not know that yet. She was not going to pretend she knew it. But she thought it anyway. Because some things you think ahead of the evidence, not because you're certain, but because you need something to move toward when the floor has gone out from under everything else. She looked at Seo Rin. She looked at Junhyuk. She looked at the window where the winter morning had finally committed to itself, gray and flat and entirely real. Here's what happens now," she said. And her voice was steady, and in the chair Seo Rin looked at her with something that was almost the beginning of what could become trust. And in the corner, Junhyuk lifted his face to hear what she was going to say, and Amara Whitmore took a breath and began. "Here's what happens now," Amara said. Neither of them moved. Junhyuk stayed in the corner chair with his hands on his knees and his authority suspended, and his empire contracting around him like a lung after a blow. Seo Rin stayed in her chair beside the bed, with her hands folded in her lap and 60 years of being the wrong kind of daughter sitting in the lines around her eyes. The baby stayed where he was, pressing steadily against Amara's ribs, doing what he had been doing since before any of this started existing, insisting, not asking permission. "The divorce proceeds," Amara said. "No contested custody. You get access, regular, documented, real access. Every other weekend to start. Holidays negotiated in good faith, not by lawyers billing $500 an hour to argue about Christmas." She looked at Junhyuk. "You show up. That's the requirement. Not money, not lawyers, not arrangements made through staff. You show up in person for your son. Every time." Junhyuk nodded once. Seo Rin's inheritance claim goes through probate without obstruction from your legal team. You withdraw the standing instructions to contest it. Whatever your father signed, she receives what it specifies, and the family acknowledgement goes in writing, not a private letter, a legal document that can be produced if anyone challenges it in the future. "I'll contact the attorneys today," he said. "You'll contact them in front of Park Min-seok," she said, "who witnessed your father's signature and has been carrying that for 8 years. He deserves to see it corrected." Junhyuk looked at Seo Rin. "Yes," he said. "The Betrayal financial audit proceeds cooperatively. You don't obstruct it. You don't manage it. You let the independent oversight do what it's there to do." He was quiet for a moment. "That will be a long process," he said. "I know. There will be things in it," that he stopped. "The organization's exposure will be significant. That is a consequence of how the organization was run," she said. "I'm not asking you to fall on a sword. I'm asking you to stop making it worse." He looked at the floor, then back at her. "And the federal inquiry," he said quietly. She met his eyes. I spoke with Agent Reyes this morning, she said. I told her I was willing to provide documentation of the financial structure and the extraction accounts. I told her I had no knowledge of the organization's criminal operations, which is true. The forensic accounting is what she wants, and she can build that without me testifying to anything I didn't personally witness. She paused. You need your own counsel for the federal piece. Criminal counsel, not the corporate team. Someone who doesn't have existing relationships inside the organization. He was very still. You could have given them everything, he said. I could have. You didn't. No. He looked at her with an expression she had no word for. Not gratitude. Gratitude was too small for it, and also somehow wrong. More like the look of a man who has measured himself against someone else and found the measurement surprising. Why, he said. She thought about it honestly. Because Elias is going to grow up knowing who his father is, she said. And I would rather he know a man who made serious mistakes and faced them than a man who was destroyed from the outside. The first version he can learn something from. The second version just leaves him angry at everyone. She looked at her hands. This isn't mercy, Junhyuk. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for him. He said nothing. After a moment, he stood. He stood and looked at Seo Rin once more, a different look from all the previous ones. All the avoidance and the management stripped away, and said, I'll call Min Seok this morning. I'll be there, Seo Rin said. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. Amara. He did not turn around. Yes, the night I left. His voice was careful and slow, choosing each word the way you choose footing on uncertain ground. I knew what I was doing. I'm not going to tell you I didn't know. I knew, and I went anyway, and I have been trying to understand why I keep choosing the thing over the person, and I don't have a clean answer for you. He paused. I just want you to know that I knew. I'm not going to pretend it was confusion. She looked at his back. I know you knew, she said. He walked out. The contraction stayed quiet through the morning. Dr. Shin came at noon, checked her numbers, and said with the particular satisfaction of a doctor whose patient had cooperated with the plan that things were stable enough to consider discharge the following morning, if nothing changed overnight. She said this to Amara, and also, pointedly, to the room in general, as though addressing the situation itself and asking it to hold. Seo Rin went to meet Jun Yuk and Park Min Seok at 2 in the afternoon. She came back at 4:30 with a document in her hand and an expression that was not happiness exactly. Happiness was not the right word for something this complicated and this long in coming, but something adjacent to it. The expression of a person who has been standing outside a door for a very long time and has finally been told they were allowed to come in. She sat down in her chair and put the document on the table beside Amara's bed without speaking. Amara read it. It was a formal withdrawal of all legal opposition to the Han Seo Rin inheritance claim signed by Jun Hyuk and countersigned by the Baekrion Holdings Board representative. Attached was a second document, a family acknowledgement, prepared by Jun Hyuk's personal attorney, stating that Han Seo Rin was the biological daughter of Kang Dae-won, acknowledged as such by the Kang family, and that her father's wishes regarding his personal estate, as expressed in the signed inheritance amendment, would be honored in full. At the bottom, in Jun Hyuk's own handwriting, was a single line that had not been drafted by any attorney. I am sorry for the years I took from you. Kang Jun Hyuk. Amara looked at that line for a long time. Seo Rin was looking at it too. How was he, Amara said. Quiet, Seo Rin said. He signed everything without argument. He didn't make it about himself. She paused. Min Seok cried, which I did not expect from a man his age. He kept apologizing for being in that room 8 years ago and saying nothing. She looked at the document. I told him he could stop apologizing and just make sure the documents got to probate court intact. Did that help? It gave him something to do, which is the closest thing to help for a man like him. Amara smiled. It was small and tired and genuine. And you, she said. How are you? Seo Rin considered the question the way she considered all things completely without rushing. I don't know yet, she said, honestly. I spent so many years wanting the acknowledgement that I don't know exactly what to do with it now that I have it. I thought I would feel different. She looked at the window. I feel the same and also not the same. Both at once. That's probably right, Amara said. I think that's what it feels like when something real changes. Not the way it does in films. Just both at once. Seo Rin looked at her. How are you, she said. Amara thought about it. Tired, she said. Sad. relieved, angry still underneath everything, but the anger is quieter than it was. She put her hand on her stomach. Mostly, I just want to meet him. I've been so focused on everything else, and he's just been in there this whole time, waiting. Rin looked at her hand on her stomach. He'll be here soon, she said. Yes, Amara said, he will. Elias Kang Whitmore was born 11 days later, not in Busan. They had moved Amara back to Seoul after the hospital discharge, to a smaller apartment she had rented herself, not the penthouse, not anything close to the penthouse in a neighborhood she had chosen, because it had good light in the mornings, and a market 2 blocks away, and nobody in it who knew her as Jun Hyuk's wife. She had rented it under her own name, splitting, paid the deposit from her own account, the one she had maintained separate through the marriage, because her mother had told her very early on that a woman should always have an account her husband didn't manage. Her mother had arrived from Atlanta 5 days before Elias was born. She had arrived with 2 large suitcases and a carry-on filled with things that Amara had not asked for and absolutely needed: her grandmother's quilt, 3 specific food items unavailable in Korea, and a book of crossword puzzles, because her mother did crosswords in every waiting room and hospital she had ever sat in, and was not going to stop now. She had stepped off the plane, found Amara at the arrival's gate, and held her for a long time without saying anything. Then she stepped back, looked at her daughter's face, and said, "You look terrible, and I'm very proud of you." Rin had come to Seoul too. A sound like green wood splitting. She had closed the bookstore for 2 weeks, the first time it had been closed for anything other than illness in 11 years, and she had come up on the train with a single bag and had installed herself in the small apartment's 2nd bedroom, with the matter-of-fact efficiency of a woman who had decided that this was where she was needed and was not interested in debating it. Amara's mother and Rin had met at the kitchen table on the first morning, and Amara had watched the 2 of them from the doorway, her American mother from Atlanta, with her direct eyes and her opinion about everything, and this Korean woman who had spent 30 years running a small bookstore and learning to take up the exact amount of space she was given, and no more. And they had looked at each other across the table with the particular assessment of 2 women, who had both, in very different ways, spent years holding things together that should not have required holding. Her mother had poured Rin tea. Rin had accepted it. They had not needed much more than that. Elias was born at 7:14 in the morning on a Tuesday, during a labor that lasted 9 hours and was neither the smooth, triumphant experience of certain stories nor the screaming disaster of others, but something in between, long and hard and punctuated by moments where Amara had said things she would not have in other circumstances, and moments where she had gone very quiet in a way that frightened the nurses more than the noise had, and finally the moment where he arrived and the room changed around him, the way rooms change when the thing they've been waiting for appears. He was small, not dangerously small. He had made it to 35 weeks, and the doctors had prepared her for the possibility of a NICU stay. But he arrived with enough in his lungs to announce himself, and the nurse who placed him on her chest said, "There he is," in a tone that meant she had done this 1,000 times and still found it worth saying. Amara looked at his face. She had thought, in the months of pregnancy, that she would recognize him, that he would look like someone she knew. He did not look like anyone she knew. He looked like himself entirely, a specific person who had not existed before, and was now here, wrinkled and squinting and deeply unimpressed with everything about the room except the warmth of her chest, where he settled his face and went still. Her mother was crying in the corner. Rin was not crying, but her face had done something she was not controlling, some softening around the eyes that made her look younger and more open than Amara had yet seen her. Jun Hyuk was in the waiting room when Amara's contractions had started, and had sat in the waiting room for 9 hours without being asked to leave and without asking to come in. He had been given updates by the nurse at intervals. He had not complained about any of it. He had simply waited, which was not something that came naturally to him and which he had done anyway, and Amara thought that was worth noticing, even if she wasn't ready to say it out loud. When the nurse went out to tell him, she relayed back that he had said one thing. Is she okay? Not is the baby okay? Not how's my son? Just is she okay? Amara asked the nurse to tell him he could come in for 10 minutes. He came in quietly, the way he had left the apartment on Christmas Eve, without announcement, without drama. He stood at the foot of the bed and looked at the baby on her chest, and his face did what faces do in those first moments. The thing that happens before a person can decide how they want to look. The involuntary thing that is not performance. He looked at his son. His son looked in his general direction with the unfocused determination of a person who could not yet see clearly and was going to keep trying anyway. Elias, Amara said. This is your father. Junhyuk said nothing. He stood at the foot of the bed for the full 10 minutes and said nothing, and when the time was up, he thanked the nurses and thanked Amara in a voice that had lost all of its architecture, all of the careful construction, and walked back out. Her mother watched him go. Her mother said, which was her most comprehensive sound, the one that contained entire opinions she had decided not to voice. Don't, Amara said. I didn't say a word. You said, is not a word. Amara looked at her son. He'll figure it out, she said. Or he won't. But I'm not going to decide for him. Her mother came and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Elias with the particular expression of grandmothers who have been waiting for this specific face. Hello, her mother said to him. Very quietly, as though introducing herself to someone she intended to know for a long time. I've been waiting for you. The Betrayal audit took 7 months. Amara was not part of it. She had given Agent Reyes the financial flow documents and the corporate records and one telephone interview that lasted 4 hours and covered every structural element she understood. And then she had stepped back from it entirely because she had her own life to construct, and it was not going to build itself. She went back to work 3 months after Elias was born, not for a firm. She set up her own practice, financial consulting, corporate structures analysis, the kind of forensic work she had spent 12 years building expertise in and had spent 6 years doing on behalf of other people's clients. She had 3 clients in the first month, 2 of whom were referrals from former colleagues who had watched her career and assumed she would surface somewhere, eventually, and one of whom was a small nonprofit that could barely afford her hourly rate and which she took anyway because the work was interesting and because she was not going to price herself out of interesting work. She worked from the apartment in the mornings while Elias slept. She worked in the evenings after he went down. She was tired in a way that was different from all the previous kinds of tired, more specific, more present. The tiredness of someone doing things that are hard because they matter rather than because someone else decided they should matter. Seo Rin went back to Busan after 3 weeks. She went back to the bookstore, which had survived its brief closure without incident. Her regulars had left notes in the mail slot, and one elderly woman had left a small potted plant on the step which had not survived the 2 weeks, but whose gesture Seo Rin appreciated anyway. She reopened on a Thursday morning, and the first customer through the door was a 12-year-old girl looking for something to read. And Seo Rin spent 20 minutes asking her questions before pulling 3 books from different shelves and saying, "Start with this one and tell me what you think." She called Amara every Sunday evening. This had not been arranged or agreed upon. It had simply happened the first Sunday after she went home. Seo Rin had called at 7 in the evening, and Amara had answered, and they had talked for 40 minutes about nothing particularly consequential. And the following Sunday, the same thing had happened. And by the third Sunday, it was simply what Sunday evenings were. They did not talk about Junhyuk. They talked about Elias, about clients, about what Seo Rin was reading, about what Amara's mother had said most recently that was simultaneously maddening and correct. They talked the way people talk when they have been through something together that cannot be summarized and have decided not to try. Junhyuk came for Elias every other weekend. He came on time. This was the first thing Amara noticed, and then stopped noticing because it became simply true. He was there when he said he would be there, and he left when the time was up, and he did not use the handoffs as opportunities to relitigate anything. He carried the diaper bag without being asked. He sent updates when he had Elias photographs, brief texts with specifics. He ate well. He slept 2 hours. He likes the mobile above the crib, but screams when the music stops. He was learning his son the way you learn something. You cannot afford to get wrong with attention and without shortcuts. She did not know what he was like when he was alone with Elias. She was not there for those hours. But Elias came back from them, fed and content, and sometimes slightly overstimulated, which suggested someone was trying too hard to make every moment count, and she thought that was probably right, and probably not the worst problem a father could have. She did not love him anymore. That was not quite true. The love had changed into something that did not have a clean name, not love, not nothing, not the cold clarity of pure anger. Something more like what remains when a fire has burned through everything flammable and left the structure standing, the frame of what it had been, without the heat. She looked at him sometimes during the handoffs and felt that 6 years of their life together as a weight that was not pleasant and not gone. And she carried it the way you carry something that changed you without being able to say it was entirely a bad thing. The legal divorce was finalized in October. She had kept her name Whitmore, not Kang, which was what was on their marriage certificate, because Whitmore was her name, had been her name before him, and she was not going to practice her signature on a train and become someone different because someone else had taken something from her. The settlement was fair, not generous, not punitive. Fair, which was a harder thing to arrive at than either of the extremes, because fairness required both people to stop trying to win and start trying to be accurate, and accuracy was painful in its own specific way. Her mother went back to Atlanta in April when Elias was 6 weeks old, and Amara had demonstrated, to her mother's satisfaction, that she knew how to do this without supervision. She had stood at the airport gate and held her mother for a long time, and her mother had said, into her hair, "You're going to be fine." "I know," Amara said. "I'm not saying it to comfort you. I'm saying it because it's true. I know that too." Her mother pulled back and looked at her face. "What do you need?" she said. "Right now?" "Before that." Amara thought about it. "I think I just need to build it," she said. "Whatever comes next. I need to stop waiting for someone to tell me what shape it is and just build it." Her mother nodded. "Then build it," she said. November came, and the air in Seoul went cold, the way it did quickly, without the slow descent of autumn. Just 1 week it was cool, and the next week it was cold, and the trees had finished their business with the year. Amara walked Elias in the mornings before her first client calls, in a route that took her past a small park 2 blocks from the apartment and then back along the market street, where the vendors set up their stalls at 6 and were already busy by the time she arrived at 7. She had started recognizing people. The woman who sold persimmons from a folding table and always asked how the baby was sleeping. The old man at the coffee cart who poured a perfect cup every time and never asked any questions about anything which she appreciated more than she could say. She was building something. It was not grand. It was not the life she had imagined at 32 in Hong Kong, meeting a powerful man and thinking, this could be something. It was smaller than that, and more specific and more hers, and it had the particular solidity of things that are built without help from anyone who might later want to take them apart. She talked to Seo Rin on a Sunday in November, and Seo Rin said, without preamble, "I've been thinking about expanding the bookstore." Into what? More space, a reading room in the back. Something for children, a corner, with low shelves and floor cushions. "I have the money now." She said it plainly without weight. The inheritance had cleared probate in September. The personal estate had been what Day One's document said it was: substantial, legitimately held, clean. Seo Rin had received it without ceremony. She had not moved to a larger house or bought anything demonstrative. She had put most of it in an account and been thinking about what she actually wanted to do with it for 6 weeks. There are children in the neighborhood who have no place to go after school that isn't a screen. I want to give them somewhere with books. That's a good idea, Amara said. I think so. I want to call it Seo Rin's Corner. Just the corner, not the whole store. I want my name on something. Amara smiled. Put your name on it, she said. I will, Seo Rin said. And in her voice, under the evenness, something that was warm. Christmas came back around. It came with the specific weight that first anniversaries carry the knowledge of what the same date had held the year before. The involuntary comparison, the assessment of distance traveled. She was not in the penthouse. She was in the apartment with Elias, who was now almost 2 months old. The Christmas she was in Busan had been his first. Spent inside her, the two of them in a hospital bed, while the adults around them made the decisions that would shape his life. This was his first Christmas with a tree, which he was not yet capable of appreciating, but which she put up anyway. A small one from the market stand, slightly asymmetrical, with ornaments she had bought herself, and a string of lights that worked on the left side and flickered on the right. But she hadn't returned it because she found the flickering somehow appropriate. She bought herself a good bottle of wine and did not drink it alone. because Seo Rin was there. Seo Rin had come up from Busan for 3 days. She had brought books, of course. She had brought books. She had never in her life arrived anywhere without books, and a small handmade ornament she had found at a Busan market. A tiny wooden fish, painted blue, which she hung on the flickering side of the tree. For luck, she said. I thought you weren't superstitious. I'm not, but I like the fish. Amara looked at the fish on the tree. I like it too, she said. Junhyuk came at 3 in the afternoon and took Elias for 2 hours. This was what they had arranged on Elias's first Christmas. He would spend the middle part of the afternoon with his father, because Amara had made the decision that Elias would grow up, knowing his father existed, and was present and made the effort, even if the effort was still imperfect and would probably remain imperfect for a long time. She had made this decision not out of forgiveness. Forgiveness was a separate process that was happening on its own timetable and could not be rushed, but out of the understanding that her son's life was not a venue for her grief about her marriage. Junhyuk arrived at the door carrying a gift that was far too large for a 2-month-old and a look on his face that said he knew it was too large and had not been able to stop himself. Sian answered the door. They looked at each other. She said. She said. A pause. Is the baby ready? He said. I'll get him, she said. She stepped from the door and left them in the brief, awkward geography of two people who had too much history for small talk and not enough new history yet for the other kind. Amara came out with Elias in his carrier and handed him over with the specific competence of someone who had done it enough times that the handoff no longer felt like letting go of something precious, but just like the ordinary transfer of a person from one set of arms to another. Junhyuk took his son and looked at him, the way he always did completely, as though Elias required his full attention and everything else could wait. 2 hours, Amara said. 2 hours, he confirmed. He started to turn away, then stopped. He looked at Seo Rin, who had come back to stand a few feet behind Amara. How is the store? He said. Seo Rin blinked once. Good, she said. I'm adding a children's corner, I heard. He looked at his son, then back at her. Our father would have liked that. Seo Rin was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said. I think he would have. Junhyuk nodded once, the particular nod of a man who has said what he was going to say and is not going to add to it or take it back. He went down the stairs with Elias. Amara closed the door. She stood with her back against it for a moment. Seo Rin was watching her. Our father, Amara said. I heard it, Seo Rin said. That's the first time he's... I know. They stood in the small hallway of the apartment, and neither of them said anything else about it, because some things are better left in the space where they happen, rather than translated into language, and both of them had learned enough about the damage of saying the wrong thing at the wrong moment to know when to stay quiet. They went back to the kitchen where the wine was open. The small tree glittered crookedly in the living room corner, and the afternoon light came through the window at the angle that made Seoul look for a moment almost gentle. The audit findings were released in January. Amara read the summary in the news. A journalist had gotten hold of the general structure of the findings, not the specifics, the kind of story that said significant financial governance irregularities and voluntary cooperation with authorities and internal restructuring of executive leadership. The story mentioned the chairman stepping back from day-to-day operations. It did not mention her name. It did not mention Seo Rin. It did not mention a signed document in a storage unit in Busan, or a brass key or a letter that had sat in a wooden box for years waiting for someone to open it. She read the story once and put her phone down. She thought about whether she felt anything specific. She felt the particular flatness that comes after a long and complicated thing has finally stopped moving, not resolution exactly, not completion, but the absence of momentum. The story had been running since Christmas Eve, a year ago, had been building through every corridor and hospital room and kitchen table it had passed through, and now it had arrived somewhere and stopped. And the stopping felt less like an ending, and more like what was true, not the end of the story, just the end of this particular motion. She picked up her phone and called Seo Rin. I saw the news, Seo Rin said. I figured. How do you strange, Amara said. You? Strange, Seo Rin agreed. A pause. I made progress on the children's corner today, Seo Rin said. The carpenter finished the low shelves. They look good. Send me a photograph. The photograph came through a minute later. Low wooden shelves, painted a soft yellow floor cushions in 2 colors. A small chalkboard on the wall, with a space for titles. Simple, well made. exactly the right scale for small people who were just learning what they could find in books. In the bottom corner of the photograph, on a small square of wood beside the entrance to the corner, was a carved name, Seorin's Corner, her name, on something that would remain. In a town where she had spent 30 years, the woman nobody was supposed to know about. She had put her name on something, and it would be there after she was gone. And children who had never heard of Kang Dae-won, or Bakery on Holdings, or a signed document in a cushions, and pick up books and then sit on those cushions and pick up books, and never know that the corner with their name on it had been built by a woman who had waited most of her life for the right to sign her own name to anything at all. Amara looked at the photograph for a long time. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's just shelves," Seo-rin said, but in her voice warmth. Real warmth, February. Amara had a meeting with a new client, a mid-sized logistics company with a corporate structure that had become over 15 years of growth, so layered and complex that nobody inside it could fully map it anymore. The CFO had found her through a referral and had sent over the existing documentation before their first call, and she had spent 2 evenings going through it with the particular pleasure she always felt when a complex structure yielded its logic to patient attention. It was good work. She sat across from the CFO in a conference room in Gangnam and walked him through what she had found and what she recommended, and she spoke with the confidence of someone who knew their subject and had stopped apologizing for knowing it. And when she left the meeting 2 hours later, he had asked her to come back the following week. She walked to her car. She sat in it for a moment before starting it. She thought about the conference room in Hong Kong, where she had met Jun Yuk almost 7 years ago now. She had been confident then too, walking into a room full of men who were not sure what to make of her, walking in, knowing her material, and knowing that the material was what she was there for. She sounded like green wood splitting. She had been confident and also lonely in the particular way that high-achieving single women in their early 30s are sometimes lonely, not desperate, not incomplete, just aware of a space that she had been filling with work and that she had, for a while, believed could be filled with the right person instead. She had been right that the space existed. She had been wrong about what it needed. It had not needed Jun Hyuk. It had needed this, the specific weight of her own competence in her own hands, uncoupled from anyone else's power or approval or need. It had needed to be built instead of borrowed. She started the car. She drove home through Seoul in the late afternoon, the city doing what it always did, loud and bright and relentlessly alive. And she thought about Elias waiting at the apartment with the woman she paid to help in the mornings, and about the call she would make to Seo-rin on Sunday. And about the second client inquiry she had received that morning from a small real estate development company that needed exactly the kind of structural analysis she had spent a year doing for her own life. She was building it. Not perfectly. Not on schedule. Not in a way that anyone else could have drawn up on paper beforehand. But it was hers, every crooked corner of it. There was one last thing. In March, a Thursday, she received a letter by courier. Not an email. An actual letter, handwritten on plain paper. The handwriting was careful and deliberate, and she recognized it from the framed documents she had seen in the office of the penthouse she no longer lived in. She opened it. It was 2 pages. Jun Hyuk wrote that he had been seeing a therapist since November. He wrote this without preamble or justification, as a fact. He wrote that the therapist had asked him to write a letter to the person he had most wronged, and that he had written in 4 different versions, three of which he had destroyed, and that this was the 4th, and that he was sending it before he changed his mind. He wrote that he understood he had treated Amara the way he treated all threats to his control, as problems to be managed, rather than people to be respected. He wrote that he had been doing this since before they met, had been doing it so long that he had lost the ability to see he was doing it at all, and that he was aware that understanding this now did not undo anything it had caused. He wrote about Seo-rin. He wrote that the anger he had felt when he found his father's signed document the day after the funeral was the most honest thing he had felt in years, and that he had turned it outward instead of sitting with it, and that turning it outward had given him someone to punish who did not deserve to be punished. He wrote that he was learning, slowly and without grace, how to be Elias's father rather than Elias's provider. He wrote that there was a difference he had not understood before and was beginning to understand now. He wrote that Elias had laughed for the first time during his last visit. At something that was not even intentional, Jun Hyuk had dropped a set of keys, and the sound had made the baby laugh. And Jun Hyuk had dropped the keys 4 more times because he wanted to hear it again. He wrote this with something that was as close to tenderness as his handwriting had probably ever come. He did not ask for anything. He did not ask for forgiveness or response or a change in their arrangement. He ended the letter by saying that he hoped she was building what wanted, because she deserved to build what she wanted, and that he was sorry it had taken losing her for him to understand what she had been. Amara read the letter twice. She sat at the kitchen table with the morning sun coming through the window and Elias asleep in the other room, and the sounds of the city beginning its day outside, and she sat with the letter and with everything it meant and did not mean. Then she folded it carefully along its original creases and put it in a drawer. Not thrown away, not in a frame, in a drawer. The appropriate place for things that were true and complicated, and not yet finished becoming what they were. She walked Elias in the park that afternoon. The March air still had winter's edge, but something else was starting in it, the specific quality of air that is about to change, that has made its decision and is waiting for the calendar to catch up. The persimmon vendor was not there yet, too early in the season, but the coffee cart was. And the old man poured her the same perfect cup he always did and looked at Elias in the carrier and said nothing, which was his version of acknowledgement. She walked the full circuit of the park. She thought about Christmas Eve a year and a few months ago. The penthouse, the dark, the message on the tablet, the wooden box on the bottom shelf. The moment she had stood up and packed her bag because rolling back over and going to sleep was no longer something she was capable of. She had not done anything heroic that night. She had simply been unable to keep pretending. That was all. That was the whole thing. The inability to keep pretending had been the door, and she had walked through it not because she was brave, but because staying had finally cost more than leaving, and she was a woman who understood cost. Everything after that had been consequence. Long, painful, expensive, irreversible consequence, the kind that did not resolve cleanly or on schedule, but that had, in its slow accretion, built something she had not had before. She stopped at the bench in the center of the park and sat down with the coffee and looked at the bare trees beginning their quiet annual argument with winter. The first swelling at the branch tips that meant something wasn't coming. The almost imperceptible shift that preceded everything. Elias was awake. He was looking at the trees. He was looking at them with the complete attention of a person who was encountering trees for what was effectively the first time, not with wonder exactly, because wonder required more reference points than he had yet accumulated, but with the total openness of a person who had not yet learned to look past things. She watched him look at the trees. He thought, he doesn't know any of it. He will someday, some amount of it, in some version shaped by time and by what his parents choose to tell him and what they choose to carry alone. But right now he knows none of it. Right now he knows warmth and the sound of her voice and the fact that trees exist. That seemed like enough for a Thursday in March. More than enough. She finished the coffee. She stood up. She adjusted the carrier, checked the buckles, the way she always did, twice, automatically, the habit of a woman who double-checked things, and started back toward the apartment. Soul moved around her the way it always moved, without pausing, without accommodation. The city's enormous indifferent aliveness doing what it had always done. She had arrived in it 7 years ago as someone else's context, an adjunct to a powerful man's powerful life, and she had stayed past the end of that life and was here now as herself, which was a smaller thing in certain ways, and in certain ways not smaller at all. She did not have everything figured out. She had a flickering string of lights on a crooked Christmas tree, and a Sunday call she looked forward to, and a son who had laughed at the sound of falling keys, and a drawer with a letter in it, and clients who needed what she knew how to do, and a practice she was building 1 week at a time. She had the brass key from Day One's box, which she had kept. She did not know why she had kept it. It had no lock left to open. But it sat on her kitchen windowsill in the morning light, that small worn thing that had waited 30 years to serve its purpose and had served it completely, and she found she was not ready to put it away. Some things you keep not because they're useful anymore, but because they remind you of the moment when useful was exactly what they were. She turned the corner onto her street. The apartment building was there. The light was on in her window, because she had left it on, as she always did now when she left. Coming home to a lit window was not a small thing, it turned out, when you had spent enough time coming home to dark. She went up the stairs. She unlocked her door. She stepped inside. Her son made a sound from the carrier, not distress, not hunger, just sound, the particular vocalization of a small person announcing their continued presence in the world. "I know," she said. "I hear you." She took off her coat. She was home.